Welcome everybody to our 9th international webinar. I am Michal Rimon and I'm the CEO of Access Israel. And guys, we're back and it feels so good to see you all here. Before I continue to speak, I would like to mention a few things about the accessibility of this event. In order to be more accessible for people with visual disabilities, we are going to ask every speaker to begin by giving a short description, visual description of himself, his surrounding, just so we will all be on the same page. So I will begin and set an example here. I'm Michal Rimon. I'm a white woman with blonde hair, blonde brownish, depends who you ask. I'm wearing a black shirt. And in the back of me, there is a sign of Access Israel with the logo that we're believing so much in. Accessibility equals sensitivity in white over blue. And I will ask every speaker to do the same. We have sign language provided by our great partners who always come through, language people from the USA. You can pin the translators so you can see them while you're seeing the speaker as well. The names of our sign language interpreters are Pamela S. and ODA. So their names are written in their little box, so you can pin them. Now I see that Pamela S is translating, so please use that. We also have live captioning. You can turn the captioning on the bottom of the Zoom screen by clicking the CC icon. And if you have problems with any of the solutions, please feel free to message us in the chat or write directly to our staff member, the lady that made this all possible, Noah Biron. For all the Hebrew speakers, this time we did listen to you and we have provided captioning. Unfortunately, in Zoom, we couldn't find a way to have both captioning together. So now in the chat, there is a link to a Google Doc file that you can click on and open it parallel to the Zoom screen and have live captioning in Hebrew translations of the speakers here. In addition, as I said, the webinar is recorded and on Facebook Live for whoever is interested. I can tell you we received a lot of emails of people vacationing, which is already a great thing to hear after last year. People vacationing and saying, we can't join, but please send us the recording. So we are expecting more and more ripple effects of this webinar in the future. And you will, of course, be able to find in several days the recording in our global accessibility website, which now in the chat, there is a link to that website. You can copy and connect later on. Now, where was I? Welcome to all. We are so happy to welcome you to the Access Israel Network for Accessible Future. For all you newcomers, this is a network of experts, policymakers, technologies, service providers, business representatives, and many more. And it's not by chance that we are not choosing the regular webinar format of webinars, but we're doing it like a meeting with all these small windows which enable us to see you all, because this is what it's all about, the network, the getting together, seeing the faces, seeing the smiles. We started this webinar series at the beginning of COVID-19 in order to enhance the sharing and learning from each other in such a crisis. The goal of this network is to come together, to share, to remove barriers, and make sure that no one is left behind. The number of participants have grown from webinar to the next, and it has created an amazing network of people who work to make the world accessible and inclusive for all. I can tell you, truly, I missed seeing these smiles from all over the world coming together, and I have no doubt that this webinar will join the 8 previous webinars and really give us a boost and help us work together and work better for a better future for us all. I'm excited to share with you that we have registered almost 600 people already from over 80 countries. More are coming in as we're speaking. And as I said, many more will be watching the videos afterwards. We're very excited that this international community is growing continuously. this is definitely one of the lemonades of the COVID-19 lemon. Now, let's be clear. I always prefer the face-to-face meeting. Here in Israel, we already believed in a way that restrictions are over. We're already back to some kind of normalcy. And then all of a sudden, the COVID raised its head again, and we're back to restrictions, as many of you are experiencing in their countries also. We won't let it break us. And together, we will make the most out of these times. As long as our community enjoys and demands these webinars of Access Israel and other partners, which we will mention later on, we will continue. And I'm using this opportunity to invite each and every one of you. If you have any best practice, innovation, idea that you think should be shared in this platform, contact us. This is here for you to share. We are more than happy to hear about more innovations, new speakers, and join them in so everybody can enjoy. We have today participants from all over the world that are coming together to talk about accessible transportation and how we can make sure that as we progress to a more technological, digital world, we make sure transportation is accessible for all. Now, from looking at the countries and cities of origins, we see that we are a very diverse group. Some of us already live in places with high quality, highly attainable transportation means. Others are coming from places that are less accessible in locations and transportation means. But still, this subject is, of course, relevant to us all. The focus today is not only about the most cutting-edge technological innovations, although we are going to hear several amazing such innovations, but also about the human innovations and how thoughtfulness, out-of-the-box thinking could give life to new models of accessibility. Our wish is that each and every one of us will take something out of this amazing lineup of speakers we have today. Before we start, I just want to thank our sponsors and friends for this webinar. First of all, Google, who has been an amazing supporter of our international activities and especially the webinars up till now. And Step Here, we met them last webinar when they presented their wayfinding system for people with blindness and visual impairment and the smart interactive system for accessible public transportation. And they are one of the companies who provide solutions to here and now burning issues of people with disabilities in Israel and around the world. Thank you for your support, and we will hear from them later on. I would also like this opportunity to thank our friends and partners who, I must say, I miss you guys dearly. Enough with the remoteless. I really want to meet face to face and maybe with a good cocktail in the hand, if Victor can help it. First of all, Zero Project. The whole gang, the guys that basically, I always say, infected us with the international bug and showed us how important this all is. Valuable 500, Phaser, Friends of Access Israel, Ru Global, Enable from Kenya, Manzil from the Emirates, ONCE from Spain, IAAP from all over the world, Austrian Association for the Blind. Klaus, there's no chance I'm going to say the name in Austrian. Global Ramp from Israel, and Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and many, many more. As a network, it gives me great satisfaction not only to promote what we are doing, but to share and enable all the things that you partners are sharing. Today, we have, first of all, two great partners, Phaser and Omer Tzur from Paratrek, who are going to start an amazing expedition tomorrow. Of course, accessible for all in the US. And whoever is there, we urge you, come join them, creating wonderful memories and friends. You can ask questions in the link. And Jamie, if you want to upload in the link the registry for this, that would be great. Enable from Kenya has organized the second annual Inclusive Africa Conference. It's scheduled to take place September 30th from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. East African time. This forum brings a dynamic speaker faculty who will explore global best practices to improve digital accessibility and inclusion. Last year was a great, great event with a lot of amazing speakers and partners, and I really urge you to join also. Okay, we are beginning. I would like to remind the speakers to speak clearly and slowly so everybody can follow, as this is a very international crowd. I also want to mention that everyone here is on a different level on the path to accessibility and inclusion, and that's okay. Today it's about learning, sharing, and creating new connections. We're diving in. I would like to first invite Eviatar Toron, the CEO of EcoMotion Israel. EcoMotion is promoting ecosystem of innovation in mobility, automotive, micromobility, public transportation, drones, supply chain, and more. They help startups in their journey and help mobility players implement open innovation. And we would love to hear Eviatar greet us here in the opening statements. Please, Eviatar.
Thank you, Michal. I'm honored to be the first speaking. I'll start with my description. So I'm a white man. I'll be 46 this Friday, so happy birthday to me. I have a goatee, which is at my age now is almost entirely white, and short hair and blue eyes. I will extend on what Michal just told us about EcoMotion and talk about how innovation and technology can be crucial for accessibility. So I'll be describing slides as I talk over them. Maybe until the year 2010, if you'd ask someone about Israel and automotive, what you have is what I'm now showing in the picture. There's a series of old cars here called Susita. They were manufactured in Israel from plastics, actually, not even from metal. This is why they were favorable by camels to it. But that was the situation until 2010. In 2012, already, EcoMotion was established as a smart mobility community because already then there was some activity done here. Startups like Mobileye or Via or a few others were already here, Better Place. We had a little presence from global companies. So it was understood that Israel can actually contribute to smart mobility through its advanced technology and brain power. EcoMotion was established by the Smart Mobility Initiative in the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Economy, and Israeli Innovation Institute, which is an NGO. The idea of the community is to get together entrepreneurs and their startups, high-tech companies, traditional industry, academia, investors, public sectors, and all other contributing bodies and partners and actors. And I'm showing this here as like a sun diagram with the community in the middle and icons for all those actors. And have a place where they can network and contribute to each other and help innovation grow in that sector, in the sector of mobility. It is now 2021 and Israel is at the forefront of mobility technology. We have over 600 startups in our ecosystems, ranging from two guys with a laptop to companies with hundreds of people and a lot of global presence. This is like a short introduction to EcoMotion, but this is not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about mobility as an essential right, which allows you to leave your house, go shopping, meet friends, or anything. This is a basic human right which everyone should enjoy. Maybe here's an example of how technology can provide that. What I'm showing you in the image here is Steve Maham, blind man. This is 2016, and he's driving Google's self-driving car. Well, he's not actually driving, but he is behind the wheel, and he was selected to be the first driver of the test riding Google's self-driving car. And of course, it's not an accident they chose a blind man. So you can see how he enjoys himself with his hands off the wheel in the air. There's a camera looking at his face. And naturally, the many other cameras we can't see in the image who are looking at the road and allow the vehicle to navigate itself and avoid accidents. So would you say that mobility equals automotive? Do you need to be able to ride a car to have mobility? Here's an image that shows, otherwise we are seeing a road here with a vehicle driving on the road, and on the sidewalk there's a wheelchair, and the sidewalk is cracked and bent, and the guy in the wheelchair is having a hard time moving around, because automotive-based mobility will never provide all accessibility needs and will not allow everyone to get to where they want to go. But technology, even technology coming from automotive, is an enabler. Technology can help people in all sorts of ways and can sometimes be adapted from one domain to another. And maybe the best example for that is Orcam. Orcam is a company developing a device. We are seeing that device in the picture attached to a person's glasses. And that person who has a seeing disability is able to read a road sign, is pointing his finger at a road sign, and is able to read that road sign with the help of that device from Orcam. But Orcam is a company that was started by the founders of Mobileye. So they were using their capabilities, their expertise, their technology to shift from allowing vehicles to navigate on the road to allowing people to navigate on the street and on sidewalks. Again, I'm using this as an example to how technology can be adapted and can be matched to new needs, including accessibility needs. What else can technology do? So there are many, many different examples. You're seeing here an old man with a stick crossing the road while all the traffic is standing and waiting for him. And actually, there are solutions like that with smart traffic management that identifies people that walk slower and gives them more time in the traffic light and crossing the road. And there are many other possibilities coming from technology. So I'm going to use this stage now to announce that we are planning a series of accessibility challenges together with Accessibility Israel. And we will be harnessing strong mobility players into that. And through those accessibility challenges, we will find new solutions to accessibility problems in mobility. And I'm inviting you all to stay tuned, connect to us. There's a QR code and a short link here I'm showing in the presentation. Should I read it?
Esta mañana de kayak.
Okay, so we will send this and upload so you don't need to read, but there is a QR for whoever wants. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you want to be involved in those accessibility challenges with us as mentors or raising problems, we will be very happy to hear from you. And again, thank you for this opportunity, Michal, and have a great webinar.
Thank you. And I see that Gary Ellis joined us. Gary, I don't know if you heard Eviatar in his presentation showing a blind person driving a car and really, sitting behind the wheel. We have a lot of great things to expect. Good to have you here also. And now I would love to greet really one of our major, amazing, first of all, friend and partner, Zero Project with Michael Fembeck, the director, the man behind it. So please, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michal, so much. So before I start, a brief intro to myself. I'm a middle-aged guy wearing his best pink shirt, sitting in front of the camera in his home office with gray hair and glasses that I need now for reading and looking at the screen. Yeah, so Michal, Yuval, thank you so much for this continued friendship and the continuous work together. We not only love you, but I think we have so much also in the future to contribute to each other's work. the Access Israel network and the Zero Project network are a perfect fit, and I think we can really develop this in the next 5, 10, hopefully 20, 30 years into the future. So we are committed, and we will do it if you want to work with us also in the future. But it's not only about I think sympathy and friendship that it is, and we can't wait to see you and hug you all again. But I think it also makes a lot of sense to work together. Your network and the Zero Project network are I think create a lot of synergy. Our networks, the Zero Project network, is all about finding, exploring, and sharing innovations. We have an annual cycle, and this year's topic, we have an annual topic. This year's topic is accessibility, where transport is an integrative part of it.
Michael, if you can just get a little closer to the microphone.
Sure.
Okay,
yeah. So this year's topic of accessibility, which is Zero Project's topic, is an excellent fit to today's webinar on transport, since transport is obviously a part of our this year's research topic. So we bring together in our networks people who nominate, people who judge, people who peer review, and they are literally in the thousands that contribute every year. And in the end, we are able to showcase some 75 innovations this year, all on accessibility. And you all and many, I see many familiar faces that contribute already, and a great thanks for so many people that are contributing to the Zero Project every year. So this year we are at the stage of shortlisting. Thanks to you all, we had 380 nominations from 80 countries this year. The countries that contributed most were the United States, Spain, Israel, number 3, Austria, only number 4, the United Kingdom, Brazil, India, Chile, Turkey, and Canada and Uganda. So these are the 10 countries where most of the nominations came from. We're really happy that this has turned into a truly global network and a global project. So we're really working globally with your support and with the support of so many others. We have, coming now to the topic of transport, cannot share a lot because we are still researching, but what I know already and I would like to share are some trends that we see in the innovations related to transport that come in this year. So when I look at the nominations that have been made, I see a continuous trend towards orientation systems. So there's obviously this is a topic and innovations that are around for some time already, apps and whatever, and other tools that support the orientation and the information about availability and accessibility. Still, there's obviously a lot to improve. So we get orientation systems supporting the blind, supporting people with intellectual disabilities, mobility issues. So there's still a big number of innovations in that area. A second really great group is, and I'm happy that Eviata mentioned the OrCam. These glasses and steering technologies where you use your eyes or use your head to steer technologies. There's an amazing number of great innovations coming. So I think this is really groundbreaking, and we can expect a lot coming from that side. With that, I'd like to finish just what's next for the Zero Project. So by September, we will have selected this year's 75 innovations that we will continue to share via video streaming, we will launch a search portal for being able to research all the 700 plus innovations that we've researched in the past 10 years. We will have again a printed report, and we will of course have the Zero Project conference. It will be a hybrid conference from February 23rd to February 25th. And there's a lot to announce and a lot to come. How we're going to promote these innovations. And back to you, Michael, and thanks again for the opportunity to speak here and present the Zero Project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And really, any one of you who has not attended the Zero Project really should. Mark your calendar. It is definitely the place to be. And thank you again for your friendship and partnership, Michael. Okay, diving in. Our next speaker, I am very, very happy and proud to introduce. He is the guy that got me into this accessibility dealings. Yuval Wagner, the chairman, and founder of Access Israel. Yuval, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm sharing.
Before you begin, I will just say to all those coming from Israel and using Hebrew, Noah will send now in the chat again the link to the Google Doc. You can press on that, join in, and you'll have captioning in Hebrew also.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here and opening this series of amazing speakers about the future of accessible transportation. And this is an amazing and most important issue because there are a few areas of life that for us, people with disability, accessibility is crucial. You know, it's health, it's cities that we live in, it's education, it's commerce, but one of probably the most important one is transportation. So this webinar today is very important to see what we have now and what the amazing potential we have for the future. So we first have to agree on what's the target. What are we aiming for? And we have to understand this because it's very important to understand that we want to be able, as people with disabilities, to get from any point to any other point whenever we want. Equally, like everyone else, in an accessible way, safely, comfortably, and by all means of transportation. Just like everyone else, you have to understand that right now, this doesn't occur all over the world. There are countries and cities that maybe it's better, but it's not perfect nowhere. To understand it even deeper, we have to look at transportation as a puzzle, which consists of three main parts: land transportation, air transportation, and sea transportation. And each sector has subsectors that includes various of vessels or ways of transporting. For example, in land, we have the city buses, we have trains, we have taxis, we have coaches, okay? And when we have air, we have airplanes that are wide, that are transatlantic. We have inland airplanes, which are more narrow and smaller. And of course, we have the small airplanes. And when we're talking about water and sea, we have the big cruise ship, we have canal boat, we have ferries, and we have more recreational sport and private boats. But in order, again, to have a full system that enables full accessibility, we have to make sure that all of them are fully accessible for all disabilities. And I say again, full and all. So we have to understand we have right now, we still have a lot to improve, getting to our mission to enable transportation point to point. But it's not only about the vessels themselves. We have a lot of surrounding the vessels themselves that must be accessible. The information, and today we know the information and technologies. The getting to, how do you get to the service? Waiting for it, boarding it, transporting in it, also safely in it, getting off it, and reaching your destination. So it's not only about the cars or the planes or the taxis or the boats. It's also about what you do from the beginning, from just finding information, using it, and getting back.
Por favor, mútase. Por favor, mútase.
Okay, thank you. So, saying that, we can talk about future transportation. We are entering an exciting era of future transportation, which brings in some exciting, amazing things like smart solutions, autonomous solutions, inclusive design, and at the end of the day, high potential for better accessibility. This will make sure that more people with disabilities will be able to actually use public transportation. So it sounds great. And this is what we're looking for. So we are embracing the future of public transportation. But we have here an opportunity. Actually, it's an historic opportunity to enable us to reach our ultimate goal of point-to-point, all-time, for all disabilities transportation. Because if you know accessibility, you know that when you do things by design, and anything new that you develop accessible, that opens new areas that are enabling people with disabilities. So we are really looking forward for this opportunity, making sure transportation of the future will be accessible by design, and making sure we don't do the same mistake, like always, doing it retroactively. Because doing accessibility in advance, it's saving cost, it's avoiding social groups, of course. Please enable mute everyone. Thank you. So avoid social gaps, and it has an enormous economic advantages of new technologies develops and a lot of employment for people with disabilities. And especially, it will help us to leave no one behind. So what we actually need to do in order to have it happen all over the world, we have to make sure that every country make sure that it promotes new legislation that's making sure the future transportation is inclusive, accessible by design, in all the vessels, in all the services, and all smart solutions. It's crucial. We're also approaching the transportation industry. Don't just research and develop. Don't just play with it. We want you to be fully obligating to us, people with disabilities, for actually promising us inclusive, accessible by design vessels, but also services and software and smart solutions. Also, we want countries and municipalities to obligate to this mission. We are going to promote development of accessible technology. We have to understand that accessibility evaluation is another game changer, where we plan to do evaluation on every new car and every new service, showing the world what companies are doing actually good accessibility and good inclusive solutions and what are not. We are going to promote also research and development. The more research, the more development. And of course, don't forget, when you advance and you promote and you produce any technology, any solution for people with disabilities, don't forget nothing about us with us. Involve people with disabilities. So I want to thank you very much. And if we all get together on this mission, and as you know, we said in our previous webinar, Access Israel is launching its Future for Accessibility ecosystem, and we are over there going to make together with you the accessible future for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuval, very much. I'm very, very happy to just jump ahead to our next speaker. I know that I am very, very excited to hear from what he has to say. I'm glad to introduce Mark Milden from Toyota, Head of Planning and Engagement, Paris 2024 at Toyota Motor Europe from Belgium. And today, Mark will share Toyota's commitment to ever better mobility for all, how it uses the Tokyo 2020 Games to showcase how Toyota wants to provide society with freedom to move. Mark, ready for you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Just to introduce myself, it's very interesting having to introduce yourself to people who are visually impaired, because mentally I still think I'm in my mid-20s and quite young. I'm actually in my mid-40s. I'm about 10 kilos heavier than I was in my mid-20s. I also have a lot less hair. Every speaker until now has described themselves as white. I would say I'm pink because I have very light skin and because of the sun, which sometimes appears in Belgium where I'm based. I'm a little bit pinker than usual. I'm wearing a white shirt. And in the background behind me, you can see some of the documents that we're using to plan how Toyota will contribute as the mobility partner to the Olympics and Paralympics in Paris 2024. My first slide is actually a beautiful picture of the city of Tokyo, where the Olympic Games have started, and what the Paralympic Games will of course follow in a few weeks. The big title is Mobility for All. How can we bring the joy and freedom of movement to all? Because as we say in Toyota, once you're free to move, anything is possible. So I'm going to move to the next slide, hopefully. Let's see. The screen is not switching. From your side, you're still stuck on the first screen, right? Here we go. So I've now moved on to the second slide. And what you would see on this slide is Akio Toyoda, our president and CEO in Japan. And he has a big neon sign behind him. And that neon sign says mobility company. And we are not a mobility company today. I think everybody thinks of us as a car manufacturer, but we would actually like to become a mobility company. And this story is really about our transition to that. And when we were thinking about how we would transition, we realized we cannot do this alone. We need an outside perspective. We need to become more global as a company. And actually, we signed partnerships with the International Olympic Committee. And the slide I'm showing now, there's a picture of Akio Toyoda and the president of the IOC, Thomas Bach. And on the right-hand side of this photo, you see Sir Philip Craven, who at the time was the president of the IPC, International Paralympic Committee. And actually, after Sir Philip Craven retired from the IPC, because of the partnership that we had built up with him, we actually invited him to become an external board member. So he's now an external board member of Toyota Motor Corporation in Japan. And we really see these partnerships to support our transition towards a mobility company. And of course, we're doing the Tokyo 2020 Games. We have the Games next year in Beijing 2022, the Winter Games, and then we have the Summer Games in Paris in 2024. When we think about mobility for all in Tokyo 2020, there are really two ways of looking how we can enhance mobility. The first thing is to help people move, and the second one is to move things towards you or on behalf of you. So the visual I have on this slide is the fact that we want to improve mobility between venues. So, for example, using fuel cell buses or fuel cell Mirai to make it more environmentally friendly. We have mobility within venues, so accessible people mover, I'll explain more on later, and walking area BEVs, I'll also explain. And then within the Olympic and Paralympic Village, a product we call the e-pallet, which I will also discuss more of. When we talk about moving things towards you, that includes within venues. We have 3 robots, which I will also describe later: human support robot, digital support robot, and field support robot. And we can also promote a remote presence at venues through THR3 and TTR1. The next slide, I just wanted to walk through a couple of these new products with you and explain the story behind them. The visual I have now is of a taxi. And of course, if you're visually impaired, probably you've never seen a London taxi, but it looks very similar. But this is actually because the shape of a London taxi is actually optimal in terms of maximizing space for the user. And when we tried to discuss with focus groups and so on the best design, ultimately we came to a very similar design to the London cab. And behind it, you see the beautiful Mount Fuji with a snow-capped top. So we were looking for a universal design vehicle which could support accessibility and mobility for a wide range of people. And I have multiple pictures on this slide. In the top left, what you see is the fact that there's not a door that opens out to 60 or 70 degrees, which is typical for a car. It's actually a sliding door. You cannot see the rail that it's on. It's actually part of the internal design of the car. But it means that really it's much more accessible than a traditional car. And actually in the bottom left, what you can see is that there's actually a ramp which comes out, and a wheelchair user can go up the ramp and enter the car. We've also, if we move slightly to the right, we've also put handrails and also straps for people to hold on to. So if they're not in a wheelchair, but maybe they're on crutches, this will help them feel more stable as they get into the car. And again, we also have tether points for people who are traveling in a wheelchair where they can attach themselves better. And of course, in the center at the top, you see a very large trunk to optimize equipment carrying or suitcases and so on. The next product I want to show you, and I have a beautiful visual taken 2 weeks ago, actually in Tokyo. It's a vehicle which we call the e-pallet, and we showcased this at the CES, Consumer Electronics Show, just 3 years ago in Las Vegas. And it's essentially a rectangular box on wheels, I would explain, is the best. And again, you know, this kind of box shape is the optimal shape for flexibility. And what you see here is actually the fleet of e-pallets that we are using in the Olympic Village. And actually the visual I have is the Olympic Village behind the depot in Tokyo. The next village is showing a ramp that we use for accessibility. Actually, it is possible to not have a ramp which is built on the ground. But in this case, in the village, we've done this actually because of speed. Because if there's no gap between the height of the person entering and the vehicle, we can get people on and off much quicker. So although we have a ramp that can be pulled out of the e-pallet, in this case, we don't need to use it, and we can speed up transition of people. It's also automated. I think that's the important thing to mention, is that there's no driver in this vehicle, which again, because there's no driver, this is increasing the space that can be used within the vehicle, and we can maximize the number of people that we transport within the Olympic and Paralympic Village. Just some other small design points. I've shifted now to a visual of the interior of this vehicle. We have handrails and seats that can be used regardless of heights. So traditionally, handrails might be vertical, or they might be at the top with straps. And here what we've tried to do is have different, it's kind of curved in different places. So regardless of whether it's a child, or whether it's a person, or whether it's somebody in a wheelchair, actually they will always be able to find a place where they can easily hold on to a rail and support themselves. The other thing to highlight is the fact that we have components with color contrasts. This, of course, assists people who suffer from color blindness. The next product I wanted to introduce is the accessible people mover. And this is essentially Toyota's take on the golf cart. Obviously, if you're visually impaired, maybe you haven't seen it, but when somebody is injured on the field of play, often the stretcher will come on a golf cart. So actually, we designed this with that in mind. But of course, we talked to multiple users, and we wanted to create an inclusive mobility solution so that it's not only used just to pick people up if they're on a stretcher. And we wanted to provide a low-speed, last-mile battery electric vehicle so that it's also environmentally friendly. And the key hit for us was modularity and flexibility. And what you see now in the visual is actually the ramp, which can be pulled out. It's very quickly done. I actually tried it in Japan a couple of years ago. It takes less than 30 seconds to do this. And the basic accessible people mover will be used by staff and by athletes, as well as elderly, impaired people, pregnant women, and families. And the modularity means that we can have 5 passengers, for example. That's the optimal solution, and it has a driver. It's not automated. Or if we take out some of the seats, which are easily folded out, we can have 2 passengers and 1 passenger with a wheelchair. Or we can have 2 passengers with luggage, or we can simply move goods around. And there's the relief version, which is, as I mentioned, it's a full stretcher version for people who are injured. The next products I want to introduce is actually a family. We call them walking area BEVs. BEVs stand for battery electric vehicles. And I'm just going to move on to the next visual immediately. There are 3 versions. The first version that you see on the left is the wheelchair attachment. So this can clamp onto any wheelchair, and it provides motorized power. So particularly for people who obviously have a certain degree of mobility through their wheelchair, but of course the long distances which are required sometimes to get to stadiums means that it's quite tiring for them. So this is really to help them reduce the physical effort they have to make. The middle one is a seated version. And again, this is for people who have difficulty walking, but maybe they're on crutches or something else. And again, it's to help them cover the distance. And the final one is a standing version. This is really for patrolling, for security checks, or for carrying equipment in large facilities. And all of these options, they have front obstacle detection. So as they're going through, they're really designed to go through crowds, and that's why we have an adjustable speed. So the speeds are 2, 4, 6, and 10 kilometers per hour, which is actually a lot slower than, for example, an e-scooter. An e-scooter can go 20 kilometers an hour or more, but the purpose is not to move fast across a city. The purpose is to move smoothly with people. So as you see, it's walking speed through a crowd. And this is what we believe is really important to create inclusive micromobility. The next element that I want to introduce is a family of robots, I would say. The mascots of Tokyo, both Olympics and Paralympics, are actually robots, although we have furry, cuddly versions for kids as well. And there's a whole family of Toyota robots that we've developed, not just for the games, but of course we're using the games to showcase them. The first one is the human support robot. And we are using the human support robot in the stadiums. Unfortunately, there are no spectators, but of course there are still guests from the IOC and IPC and so on. And it will guide guests to their seats. It will also deliver food and goods to spectators that have mobility constraints. And the human support robot is great in a way because especially if, for example, somebody has motor neuron disease, this is available for them to then have drinks brought to them on a regular basis or whatever. And it provides mobility in a different sense. Like I said, it's bringing things to you rather than, you having to go to those things to receive them. The next one is what we call a telepresence robot. And this is a very interesting to describe visually. Essentially, it's a little bit like one of these robot vacuum cleaners, but then it has a massive screen attached in a vertical way atop. And of course, it has a camera. And this is really to support physically impaired people who are located at home and providing them an opportunity to move within the games and provide a virtual experience. Again, the spectators are not allowed, so this is a great experience for them, very privileged experience. And at the bottom right, I actually have a picture, and it's a picture of our president, Akio Toyoda, and he is actually passing the Olympic torch to Shinsuke Suzuki. And Shinsuke Suzuki is a first-year high school student in Japan. He has an impairment in his legs, which means he cannot walk. And his grandfather actually ran in the Olympic torch relay for Tokyo 64. And when Akio Toyoda met him by chance, he heard about his dream to carry the Olympic torch and realized this was going to be a challenge. And actually, we realized that the telepresence robot, which we had prepared and developed for other reasons, would be a perfect way for him to participate. And he got that opportunity in April of this year. The last one is a bit more fun. It's a field service robot. It essentially comes onto the field of play and it assists collecting and delivering equipment. So you imagine the javelin or the discus, the shot put. These are objects that get thrown, and normally somebody has to run along and bring them back. But actually, in this case, the field service robot goes out, and the field service robot that you see in the picture is a mini version of the e-pallet, of course, with sensors and cameras on it. It also delivers the rugby ball at the start of the rugby sevens. And we don't only have it in e-pallet version, we also have it in Japan Taxi and APM versions as well. So that's Tokyo. I hope you're all enjoying it and watching some of the events, and especially as the Paralympics start in a few weeks, it will be even better. For Paris 2024, which is actually my kind of core job, I would say, and I have a beautiful visual of Paris and the Eiffel Tower on the border of the River Seine at the moment. We will, of course, take a lot of the mobility products that we have for Tokyo and build on them. But we also want to then move into services. And so I'm now moving on to the next slide, which is a visualization of what the main road, the Champs-Élysées, will look like in a few years' time as they remove cars, or at least they minimize cars on that big boulevard in Paris. And it's, we have a vision to bring sustainable and inclusive mobility products and services so that we can really demonstrate our mobility for all vision and create a legacy and happiness in a European smart city. And actually, the next slide, which probably should be updated visually, for those of you who are visually impaired, I'm going to ask you, and actually even those of you who are not, I'm going to ask you to imagine a Greek temple. Of course, Greece is the home of Olympus and the birthplace of the Olympic Games, but we have 3 pillars to build this temple. The first pillar is mobility for all. So really about offering inclusive mobility to take care of every individual movement. The second pillar is sustainability. So we want to create a sustainable society which maximizes the hydrogen ecosystem and collaborate with local entities and businesses. And the third pillar is about engagement. It's about starting your impossible, which is our kind of call to action when we talk about the Olympics and Paralympics, and create an ever better Toyota for our customers and also for our employees. And if you're looking at the temple, there's the 3 pillars, but underneath the temple, there are foundations. And those foundations for us are partnerships. In Japan, obviously, we have 50% market share. In Europe, it's about 6.5. Actually, Israel is one of our best markets, and we have much higher market share in Israel. But we want to use partnerships to maximize our impact on the Games in Paris. We want to show that we're open to partnerships. We want to use partnerships to achieve scale. And of course, we also believe by working with companies like startups that they will help us become more agile and faster. So that's the temple. Maybe the most important part of the temple is the roof, which obviously stops the rain coming in. And the roof of the temple for us is a legacy that goes beyond zero, that takes us beyond zero emissions and beyond all the restrictions that we see in society. So this is a legacy for Paris and the region for us means not only France, but actually the whole of Europe. And we include Israel within Europe in terms of our concept of Europe. And of course, a business legacy for Toyota as well. So I just wanted to talk briefly before I conclude about the Toyota Startup Awards. We had a focus on inclusive mobility when we launched them just over a year ago. There were actually 5 winners of this award, and I want to talk in a bit more depth about 2 of them. But first, let me introduce the other ones. The first one is ProsFit, which is a cloud-based platform for 3D printing tailor-made prosthetic sockets. So this is really about providing prosthetics to the 70% of the world's population who don't have access to them. The next one is Wheelies, which is a peer-to-peer accessible car rental system, which I'll explain a bit more later. The third one in the center is Seamless Vision. And this is actually an Israeli startup. And it's a robot to guide visually impaired people. So I think the best way to describe the picture is it's actually a robotic guide dog. The next one is Sociability, which I'll cover on the next couple of slides. And the third one is Able, or Able, because they're Spanish. They are lightweight, easy to use exoskeletons, and it restores the ability of people to walk. And actually, I was so amazed when one of our Norwegian parathletes who was at the Startup Awards, Birgit Skansten, she actually could walk. So she cannot walk, but with this exoskeleton, she could easily move. And this sums up, the Startup Awards. It's all about empowering people with mobility limitations to move around freely, facilitating their daily life. So going in a bit more depth about Wheelies, because this is actually something concretely we want to do towards Paris 2024. We're going to do a pilot with retailers, so Toyota retailers in the Paris region. And we will ask them to buy ProAce, which is our large kind of van, I would say, which is wheelchair accessible on the Wheelies platform. And then, use that for 12 months. And then after 12 months, we would ask them to remarket the vehicle, to sell it to a second user, and then incentivize that new owner to rent the vehicle. And of course, the beauty of this solution is that not many people can afford to modify their vehicles. So the person who has the modified vehicle, it's very expensive. So if they rent it, they can actually get revenue on that vehicle. And for people who can't afford to buy a vehicle, they have an opportunity to have a short-term solution to their mobility needs. So it's a real win-win, and it's something that we're really impressed with. The owner and the founder of this company, very inspirational, and it's been great hearing her thoughts and getting her input. The next one is sociability, and I would describe sociability as TripAdvisor for people with impairments. Essentially, it's a smartphone app, and it empowers people with impairments to explore communities with confidence and ease and peace of mind. And it's about collectively sharing detailed, reliable, and accurate accessibility info on hospitality and retail venues. And we want to collaborate with them to bring their product to Paris. They already have it in London, and we will be working with them to make it as easy as possible for guests at the games to move around. So, maybe one thing to mention is that we have a second edition of these Startup Awards, which is starting in October of this year. And of course, you should reach out, to your communities. If you know a good startup where you think they would benefit for them is either sometimes it's funding, but more often than not, it's actually coaching and mentoring. And of course, bringing attention to their product and supporting them with that development and making connections. That is all from me. So I'm now leaving you with, again, a beautiful picture, this time of the Paris skyline with the Eiffel Tower and La Défense behind. Please join us on our journey to Paris 2024. It's going to be very exciting as we shift from being a mobility company for all towards being a mobility company for all, beyond cars towards mobility solutions and services. And I guess you're going to introduce the next speaker. It's Johan from Mobileye. But of course, Mobileye is a very important supplier for Toyota. But beyond being a supplier, it's actually a partner. And what they are doing in terms of being able to reduce accidents for our customers and many other car manufacturers is fantastic. So please join us on this journey to Paris together. And I hope that we can continue to be partners together. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. First of all, I invite you to go into the chat and see the amazing responses to your presentation. The future is here, and you really painted it in amazing colors, and really, really impressive. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would also love if you can put in the chat now a link to the next stage, the second stage of startups in October that you mentioned. And if not, you can send it to us later and we can make sure everybody receives it.
Now, perfect. I'll do that. No problem.
Perfect. No, it's just we have here Nachman, I think, needs to put himself on unmute. Thank you. Perfect. Now, I am now very, very happy, as Mark mentioned, to introduce our next speakers. Every speaker is just something that we were really looking forward to hearing. So our next one is Johan Jungwirth, or short, easier for me, JJ, from Mobileye, VP Mobility as a Service, leading this new business based on self-driving vehicles. And JJ, we are very, very looking forward to hearing your presentations. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. So, JJ from Jerusalem, also basically from Europe, brighter skin, dark hair, blue eyes. I have a dark blue shirt with an M, our Mobileye logo M. And I will switch to screen sharing now and would like to go through a few experiences, a few slides from our side, talking about the future of inclusive mobility. Great presentation, Mark. Thank you very much also for our partnership. So let's dive right in. So looking at what Yuval also just briefly mentioned, we do have challenges, and I completely agree with what Yuval said. Basically, mobility today is not fully accessible. It's not really accessible when it comes to cars. And we all know, I mean, just looking at some numbers here, 26% of the adults in the US have some type of disability. About 32% actually of the population has no driver's license, meaning they are not allowed, cannot drive. And we know mobility today is actually very limited. Seeing some pictures here, of some actually very crowded intersections, actually blocked.
Por favor, mute-se. Por favor, mute-se.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And on the left side, a very crowded train station here. We do know that a lot of people actually today do not have actually access to mobility. It's just partially unavailable. Showing in this next image here, Sao Paulo, and we know actually from the mayor of Sao Paulo who said, if I could offer more mobility, I would bring more people from poverty to work and prosperity. So there's a strong connection there, and this is actually expressed in the next two slides. So number one, I just want to show you this graph here showing that mobility enables work. This is from the 5 boroughs in New York, and you see basically the people in the middle who actually have the lowest reach within 60 minutes to work. So they can neither reach the job with a car nor with public transit, and they are the ones which have basically the lowest average income. And the next chart also shows this, that the fewer jobs basically you can reach because you have no access to mobility, basically the lower the average income is, which you see on the left here. And the higher the unemployment rate is. So there's clear data. We all know that mobility is key to success. It's key to prosperity. It's key to finding work. And so there are so many reasons actually making mobility for all happen, making mobility accessible. And just a few more numbers here, looking at social costs of mobility with human drivers. And this is, where self-driving, autonomous mobility will help. And I will focus a little bit more about that in the next few minutes. So we do know today 1.35 million traffic deaths per year, about 50 million injuries, and about 94% are actually caused by human errors. We all know if this would happen in air traffic today, we would shut down all planes and there would be no more air traffic. We just kind of got used to this, on four wheels on the roads. Having now solutions actually to solve this problem, we have to. I see this as an absolute must and the need. We as society have a duty to solve this problem. Knowing that we have 1.2 billion cars actually on the roads today, and less than 0.1% of these, being fully accessible, and only about 55 minutes these vehicles are actually in use per day. Not actually a very good situation today. 1.1 average seat occupancy, also basically no sharing today, and 400 billion hours actually per year are being spent, behind the steering wheel. Also amazing numbers, and about 120,000 square kilometers actually of valuable space is allocated for parking spaces. So I think this is just, enough reasons, and these are important factors for leading us into providing solutions actually to these problems. So in our opinion, and working with partners like Toyota and others around the world, we think that the right thing to do is actually move towards driverless, inclusive mobility for all, making traffic also on roads safe, accessible, clean, affordable, and more convenient, because for those who can drive, they don't have to basically search for parking, walk in the rain, and so on. You can provide actually door-to-door mobility at the push of a button. And I think it was mentioned before, I also do believe that, mobility and also inclusive mobility is a basic human right. We all know, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948, Article 13, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement being right there. And this has led, of course, through generations, making buses accessible, making trains accessible, making planes accessible. And now, finally, I think we are basically just, about a year or two away to finally start making cars, making door-to-door mobility fully accessible. And we just think everyone has the right for this freedom of movement. And it also has, massive public benefits. If you now look at, the downsides described before, looking into the future, being it congestion, real estate, safety aspects, as we move from 2020 towards 2030, 2035, and so on. Starting from, the first commercial rollouts, basically, Waymo has just started. The next one or two are basically around the corner. We are planning actually for next year, 2022, and this has been our goal now, basically, since we have been, shifted from ADAS towards, AVs technology solutions. That this is the time where we can go driverless, and also the legislation and so on is forming. Actually, we see good progress in Germany, in France, in the EU. Also, the Israeli government is now actually debating over a new law for AV pilots here in Israel. I'm very happy about that, and of course, we are supporting that. So we are talking about, exceeding 800 billion or so per year, 4.5% of GDP in terms of public benefits, very important factor as well. And freedom of time, converting these 400 billion hours, into dollar figures. It's not necessary to do that, but just to get a sense, if you just take a GDP per hour between $2 and $5, we're talking about another 800 billion to $2 trillion of actually, letting people to have that time, spend it with their families, play with the kids, read, write, write a book, or just be productive, whatever people might want to do during this time. I included a chart here, which I created, looking at two axes. On the x-axis, going from the left, from not safe, to the right, safe. So from not safe to safe, and then looking at the y-axis, from the bottom, not accessible, to fully accessible at the top. And I have 4 dots on here describing the car, the taxi, the bus, and then driverless mobility as a service in the future. So I, see the car somewhere in the lower left corner, meaning it's not safe and it's actually not accessible, driven by a human driver. The taxi with professional drivers, and also some taxis, offering some accessibility, or at least some vehicles. I put that still in that lower left quadrant, but a bit more accessible, a bit more safe in terms of driving. I think buses have come a long way. I placed them on the x-axis in the center between not safe and safe. Even more professional drivers, good driving history, and so on, a good track record. And in terms of accessibility, I think it's in the upper half, towards the top. Not in all countries, not everywhere. We know that, and also especially shuttles and so on don't have necessarily ramps. And we think, the ambition for driverless inclusive mobility as a service needs to be in this upper right corner. Safety from driverless, from basically, 10x, 100x, 1000x safer driving than human drivers. And we need to make sure that these vehicles are accessible. We know maybe the first generation platform might not have, 100% ramp and basically all the factors I will show in the next couple of slides. But I actually think, and it's for me personally also very important. One of my niece actually, unfortunately, is having some let's say disabilities. She is just not able to, she has like a cognitive impairment, not able to drive herself. And my sister and her, Miriam, basically are asking me all the time, when will we be ready with these vehicles? When can she have one of these and doesn't have to be driven by my sister all the time? Moving on, looking at basically a vehicle similar to the e-Palette from Toyota. I think this box-shaped design is basically, what everyone envisions when we talk about, these driverless vehicles, which you can call at the push of a button. So, if they are, inclusive by design, they're accessible for all. We think that will enable mobility for all. And now on this next image, this is actually the first product we are working on right now with our partners Transdev and Lohr, the manufacturer in France. This product is a shuttle for up to 16 riders. It has an integrated ramp. The battery is actually in the rear so that the floor is lower. It has, full height entry and exit, and basically it's accessible by design. Also, it will drive regular speeds, like regular human-driven shuttles. And we plan to have this on the road in driverless operation for testing starting next year, still with a safety driver or safety operator, without steering wheel and pedals, and then 2023 to launch this vehicle in France. And when I think about future of inclusive mobility and accessible by design, I noted these factors here from, on the one hand, offering door-to-door services, the ability to stand and sit, whatever, people want to do depending on their needs and abilities, high door opening, air suspension also to lower the vehicle if needed on one side, and also having a shorter ramp and a lower angle actually for easier entry and exit. Lower floor, no underfloor battery, easy entry and exit ramp. I already mentioned that. Secured wheelchair space inside the shuttle itself. Voice control and directions to find the vehicle with proximity sensing. Fully accessible app, of course, for, any form of, impairment. And then no dependency on driver. I've done, in my past studies, for example, in London with 5 people with visual impairment, which actually, basically had to sue Uber and Uber drivers because they were just, denied service because they either had a service dog or the driver couldn't find them and so on. So it's really a pain. It's not freedom, which people basically need, and we think we can offer them with these future mobility solutions. And looking at the transportation of goods space, just one image here. We're also working with UDELV, a company in the US, also planning to launch in 2023 for transportation of goods. Now, this is not transportation of people, but it's actually also important, I think, having actually let's say the vehicle accessible by design for the workers, which load and unload these vehicles, and a very interesting approach here by our partner. And I think this is also important. And looking at the timeline, next year, 2022, we are continuing our testing in Israel and Germany, in several other places, and we think by the second half of next year, we can launch the first self-driving taxis, pods, services, and then launching the shuttles like the Lore iCrystal in 2023 and the AV transporters a bit later, and making this a reality, of course, with the legislation and regulation in place, which is required. We are currently testing, and there are several videos just last week, actually, in case you haven't seen that. Just look up New York City Mobileye on YouTube. You find some great videos, a 40-minute unedited ride, actually throughout Manhattan and Queens. So we are testing in New York, in Detroit, in Munich, in Israel, Tokyo as well, and near Shanghai. And we have the first vehicles now in Paris. We'll start testing in Paris very soon. And we look forward to working with our partners there. And we are supporting both the public transport sector here on the left, as well as the private sector, the transportation network companies on the right, to basically transform themselves from PTOs to become automated public transport companies, the same as for the transportation network companies. And we actually believe that together as Mobileye and MoveIt, our sister company, already known, I think they were here last time. And as Mobileye, we provide the technology. We call it Mobileye Drive, the full level 4 self-driving system, without going now through all the details, but we have cameras, radars, lidars, all the sensors required, and the technology to go self-driving. And my very last slide is just a 1-minute clip here, driving through Jerusalem, driverless, or in Munich, also overtaking here a fire and police vehicle. It's very hard to detect that these are obstacles, we need to overtake, or driving here in Detroit, doing an unprotected left turn, which is one of the hardest things to do, or unprotected right if you're in Japan or UK or other places like this. So thank you very much for the invite and the opportunity today.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, JJ. And again, invite you to enjoy the chats and the reactions. You guys are really painting us, an amazing, amazing future. And it's great to see accessibility is part of the agenda and a very good part. So thank you very much for that. I know that there are some questions, but we are trying to move along. And if possible, I will, of course, enable some more questions later on. Now to our next speaker. Again, I love the internationality of this panel. I am very, very happy to invite Colette Fransolette. I hope that I'm pronouncing it correctly. And Colette is the director of inclusive design and a key figure in the accessibility realm in South Africa. And she's also playing an active part in countless international organizations like our dear friends at IAAP. So we are very eager to hear from you, Colette. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think before I give you a description of myself, I'd just like to say that all the other presenters has kind of given very inspirational presentations on what the future could look like. Our presentation is much more practical on what we're actually doing in South Africa and how we're getting along on that side. So my name is Colette.
To speak into presentation mode?
Yeah.
We see now the entire thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Colette Fransolette. I am a Caucasian. I have dark features. Today I'm wearing a bit of blush. I thought I'd put on some makeup for the cameras. I'm in my lounge. So in the background, there's walls and curtains. And I'm looking forward to taking you through the presentation with us. So before I get into the images, since the announcement of the 2010 FIFA World Cup in South Africa, 13 local authorities were selected for grant funding to develop public transport networks. One such local authority was the municipality of George, which is located approximately 4 hours drive directly east of the city of Cape Town. And their system is called Go George. I've been part of this project as a universal access consultant in some capacity since 2013. And I'd like to acknowledge my clients in the audience today, for who I'm grateful that they've been so open to embracing UA throughout their system and their services. And so many thanks to the municipality of George, as well as the IPTN manager, James Robb. So before I introduce the actual vehicles that make up the system of Go George, I have to give you a brief background against which public transport has developed in South Africa. The majority of the public transport vehicles we see on our roads are minibuses, which are designed for between 16 to 19 passengers. Although pre-COVID, as many as 25 passengers could have been loaded into one vehicle at any given time. These are referred to as taxis in South Africa. These vehicles are a legacy of the racial segregation and have existed since the 1930s and still today transport the majority of our citizens and are mostly operated by taxi operators who typically own fleets of these vehicles and who operate on fixed routes. But they stop anywhere where they desire, where passengers require them to, irrespective of general traffic safety laws, and effectively run as an on-demand and passenger volume-driven service. So taxis traditionally charge extra to transport people who use wheelchairs or other people with disabilities, and are quite infamous for opting out of offering transport services to people with disabilities. So the first image you'll see on the screen shows the Go George green and blue branded bus that's parked at the curbside at a bus stop, where a group of small school children are waiting to board the bus with teachers. So the Go George integrated public transport network fleet consists of 3 types of buses that accommodate urban and rural environments over a mixed topography and varied demand levels. The standard bus, which is the one in the image, is 12 meters in length, takes 44 seated passengers, and has 2 wheelchair designated seating areas. It can also take up to 40 standing passengers in addition. We then have the mid-D bus, which is a 10.5 meter bus in length, which takes 40 seated passengers, has one designated wheelchair seating area, and can take up to 38 standing passengers. The third of the fleet is the minibus, which takes 16 seated passengers and has one designated wheelchair seating area with no standing allowed. So in the next slide is an image of two Go George buses parked behind each other at a curbside with pedestrians walking past the bus on the sidewalk. So the standard and the MIDI buses that are seen in the image on the screen are fitted internally with electronic signage, which displays the name of the next stop, which makes use of geolocating software to update the signage, and upcoming stop names are announced through an internal announcement system. The buses are fitted with stop buttons, which passengers have to activate if they'd like the bus to stop at the next stop. The next image shows a standard-sized Go George bus, which is parked at a curbside with a boarding ramp deployed from the edge of the door, where the ramp reaches the sidewalk next to the bus and the bus door is open. So the standard and the MIDI buses are designed for boarding and alighting at dedicated bus stop infrastructure, where the bus stop platform area is raised slightly from the rest of the sidewalk. These vehicles serve the urban routes of the system, where there are roadways that are generally wider and bus stops are located along sidewalks. These buses have a maximum specified kneeling height, so the buses are required to kneel to one side in order to enable boarding, of 270 millimeters from the road surface, resulting in boarding ramps, when deployed with audible and visual warnings, to have a gradient of 1 in 12. So the next slide shows the entrance of the MIDI bus, the 10.5 meter bus with the doors open. The bus is kneeling in this position at a bus stop with a boarding ramp deployed, and there is a young person in a wheelchair waiting to board the bus. So the gradient of the boarding ramp is due to the minimum chassis height of the vehicles to be able to negotiate existing road infrastructure, such as traffic speed humps, which we tend to have a lot of. As part of the pre-service of vehicle safety checks, the boarding ramp's operation is checked daily on all the vehicles to ensure smooth operation. Due to the context in which the Go George system operates, many passengers do not have easy or free access to internet, and so direct mobile communication is not as easy as it might seem in some of the more developed countries. And so our system makes use of the communication champions. So these are staff who've been trained in basic sign language and the general operations of the system. The champions then dress in a casual uniform with T-shirts that are branded, and now during COVID, masks that are branded. They walk around specific areas where access to technology and other information is potentially lacking, and they speak directly to customers about the service and how it works in a language that the users can understand. Because although English is our dominant language, we also have 11 other official languages. So this ability to communicate directly with users has been very valuable to gaining support for the use of the system. The next image shows the minibus in a parking lot. It has a side sliding door and a front passenger door which is hinged. In this image, both the doors are closed. So the minibus is designed for boarding and alighting at dedicated stops, but can also be used in areas where there's little to no existing roadway or sidewalk infrastructure. Therefore, this vehicle can serve both the urban and rural environments. These vehicles are designed to eventually replace the existing taxi systems, which I'd spoken about earlier, within the municipal area. So the next slide shows the minibus with a sliding door which is open, and the hydraulic hoist has been deployed with a young wheelchair user on the hoist platform, and the hoist is lowered to the road level. So in this image, there isn't a sidewalk or a boarding platform. The person is lowered directly onto the roadway surface or the roadway surface level. So the minibus has a basic accessible front entrance and a sliding door that is dedicated to the installation of a hydraulic hoist, which is specifically designed for passengers with disabilities. So both the front and the sliding doors are hydraulically operated and controlled by the driver from the driver's seat. These vehicles are also fitted with internal electronic signage and audible announcements. But as part of the awareness raising on universal access passengers, all the drivers of the GoGeorge system have been trained on disability awareness. And this has been done through a specifically developed board game, making the requirements of users easier to understand and transcending many of the learning barriers that staff might have previously experienced. So these minibuses are the first of its kind in South Africa and form a critical part in the rollout of accessible public transport in the country, as these vehicles are able to access all the areas where the current taxi industry services, but with the benefit of being accessible and offering a service to universal access passengers. So the next image shows a GoGeorge bus driving away, slightly in the distance, with a bus stop to the left of the image, on the left-hand side of the image, and pedestrians walking past the stop in the road where the bus would usually stop. And I think for us, the GoGeorge system, through design and awareness, has already positively affected the design and construction of other areas within the local authority, in the municipality, to be accessible to people with disabilities. GoGeorge is a public transport service provider, but is somehow driving the paradigm shift in the local authority to design spaces and places that accommodate people with disabilities. So looking into the future, the municipality of George will be becoming an accessible municipality, creating access to not only facilities, but to services and environment as well. So our team would also like to see an increase in the use of the service by passengers in general, and the development of an accessible app that's easy to use and data light would definitely be in the future for the system. And so that's what I have.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much, Colette. And by the way, people were asking about the presentation, if we can see it and all that. As I said, and again, Noah is going to upload the link to our international website. The presentations, as permitted by the speakers, will be uploaded there, and you can get more information. And of course, as we saw, the direct contact, the whole idea is to connect. And I have no doubt, Colette, that we want to hear more from you. And it was great for sharing. Thank you very, very much. Now, to our next speaker. Can't wait to see him. I haven't seen him yet. But our dear, dear friend, Victor Kalisi, or should I say Commissioner Kalisi. You're here, Victor.
Yes, I am.
Is. Oh my God! And his hair grew. I'm not supposed to say that in a webinar. Sorry. I'm going to be very professional now. So we are very, very happy to see Victor Kalisi, Commissioner of New York City's Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. As you've noticed, a very, very dear friend who tirelessly advocates for the disability community in all city decision-making. He also ensures that disability is at the forefront of technological development, including smart cities, autonomous vehicles, and digital accessibility. And by the way, we are in Olympic times. He is and has been a part of the 1998 Paralympic Games as a member of the U.S. national sled hockey team. So picture that also. Victor, we can't wait to hear from you. Great to see you again. And let's go.
Well, thank you, Michal. It's always a pleasure to be part of Access Israel. And I'm excited to be here in front of the world today. I am a white male wearing glasses with COVID-like grayish hair, wearing a blue suit and a purple shirt, and I'm in a wheelchair. It's a pleasure to see everyone, and I do see some New Yorkers here. Hello, Sharon. How are you? I see a lot of friends here, and it's great to be here. I cannot wait until we all meet in person soon. Just looking forward to that, and it's been a long year, and we here in New York City have battled a lot, and we're coming out of the other end. If we can just get everybody vaccinated, we will be in a better place. So what we're talking about today is taxis and for-hire vehicles, which are ride-sharing apps, is what you can consider them as well. So New York City has an iconic yellow taxi. I've heard some speakers already talk about New York City as a whole, especially in the autonomous world. And these iconic taxis, for some time, were not accessible for people with disabilities. There was a lot of back and forth with the community. We once had someone say that people with disabilities don't ride taxis. And the reason why people don't ride taxis is because they're not accessible. Fast forward sometime in the future, or the past at this point, after that was said, and the community pushed really hard. People with disabilities pushed really hard for full access for taxis. And when I'm talking about full access for taxis, I'm not just talking about ramps that are in taxis. We're talking about technology for people who are blind, technology for people who are hard of hearing, to make sure that they can get the services they do when they hop in a New York City iconic yellow taxi. And push came to shove, and the city of New York worked on making taxis accessible and to make 50% of that yellow taxi fleet accessible. COVID has hit, has changed things. We haven't gotten to the 50% as we want to get to, and we are committed to getting there. We are working with advocates to make this happen. And what that really relates to in the yellow taxi side is thousands of accessible taxis in the city of New York, of yellow taxis in the city of New York, which has led to lots and lots of trips. Along with that, we have also built out a series of apps so people can book a wheelchair accessible taxi when they come to the city of New York or live in the city of New York. To give you an idea of the number of people with disabilities that live in New York, it's over 900,000, close to 1 million people with disabilities. And the people that come visit New York are about 6 million people with disabilities that come visit the city every year. So having applications, being able to hail a yellow taxi on the street, those are the things that we need to be able to do so we can make sure that we serve the community in every way that we can. And we've also included making these ride-sharing apps accessible for people with disabilities. And this was done by using levers within New York City government that we didn't have to get to a lawsuit, that we didn't need to be pushed. We knew what to do. We knew what we needed to do because we worked with advocates during the yellow taxi side. And we had to make taxis accessible for people with disabilities. We knew that. And we needed to make these ride-sharing companies accessible for people with disabilities. We thought about different ways of doing it. We thought about adding a number of taxis, percentage of trips. We went so many different routes with doing this. And we got a lot of pushback. A lot of these companies turned around and said, if you add a percentage of trips, you'll end up bankrupting these companies. And as we know, these are billion-dollar companies. So what the city of New York did is we used the levers that we've had, the powers that we have in our Taxi and Limousine Commission to add accessible ride-sharing taxis. And we did that by saying that the only taxis that you can put on the street moving forward from now on are accessible taxis. And companies, in order to put those taxis on the street or put those for-hire vehicles, those ride-sharing vehicles on the street, they have to only add accessible taxis. That has pulled the pool to thousands and thousands of ride-sharing vehicles that we've never had before, that you can use in lots of app-based. You can go to any app that operates in the city of New York, and you can get an accessible option. You could pick the number of people that you want to ride in your taxi. You could pick the type of ride-sharing vehicle that you want. So these are all good ways, and this is the way that New York City has leveraged that. Now, pre-pandemic, we had lots of people ride our taxis. For the year before the pandemic, we had over 200,000 trips in accessible taxis. And remember, people said people with disabilities didn't ride taxis. Well, they didn't ride them because they weren't accessible. And when we did that, in the way that I like to think about that, when we had those 200,000 trips at about $13 to $15 per trip, the revenue that came in was over $3 million in revenue. We created a market that never happened before. Those are the levers that we've used in government, working across advocates, hearing what they need, implementing their needs into our decision-making process, using levers in government to be able to push these things forward. I'm happy to say that anybody that comes and wants to get a taxi, wants to get a ride-sharing app in the city of New York, can get an accessible option. We're the only city in the world to make these ride-sharing apps adhere to our rules. We're excited about that, and they see it as a market share now. And that's exactly what's important. Those are the things that we have to do. Those are the levers government can use, and we're excited to see that. Now, what has happened there as well, we have a paratransit system that allows people to take trips throughout the city of New York. And they've now have used these taxis, seeing this as an advantage to be able to serve their ridership as well. So we've seen government, our Mass Transit Authority, Metropolitan Transportation Authority use this for paratransit as well. So there's lots of options that are spurring because we keep adding these accessible options within our city. And people are making money on this. But I have to say, I'd be remiss if I didn't say it. We are having a challenge here in New York City, finding drivers to be able to do this during these COVID times. Hopefully, once this is over and people start coming back to the cities, start using this, we're going to see more. We're going to see more drivers coming on, so we could fill the need for people with disabilities. So I didn't have a presentation today. I thought it would just be easier to talk about it. Mikhail, I'm pretty sure I'll give you some extra time back today so you can move forward. And
my disability.
Not at all, Mikhail. Yuval, it's great to see you. Access Israel, thank you for your time. The world, thank you for your time. And I hope to see you riding an accessible taxi, for-hire vehicle, or ride-sharing app in our city sometime soon.
Victor, we cannot wait to sit, drink a cocktail here on the beaches of Tel Aviv very, very soon. So looking forward to seeing you. Thank you very much. And you know what? There are two things I want to say. I'm a movie kind of girl, and one of my favorite movies is Pretty Woman. And I love the scene when they go into the elevator and Julia Roberts tells Richard Gere, before I forget, in case I forget at the end of the evening, I want to say thank you now for an amazing evening. That she said at the beginning of the evening with a great dress. So I'm going to use this opportunity to say thank you really to our presenters, to everybody in the Access Israel staff that is with me. And you have to hear and see what's going on around me. You know, I'm sitting here calmly, drinking my coffee and listening to you guys. But everybody here is making sure that everything works great. And first and foremost, I would like to thank Noah Biron, who replaced our amazing Sharon in the position of managing the international affairs of Access Israel. So this is her first webinar, and Noah, great job. Thank you very much. We're all enjoying, and thank you in advance for a great webinar. So Victor, thank you very much. And another thing I want to tell you is that, as I mentioned before, the beauty of this network is seeing you guys, seeing the people, hearing the people. And that's why I'm going to do now something that we do whenever there is a little bit of time, and Victor just allowed us some time. I love to do a spotlight. We're hearing from our speakers from all over the world, but I want to hear from you guys. And I chose to highlight a dear friend all the way from India. Neha Aurora from Planet Abled. And what I would like, so first of all, Neha, hi. How are you? How is it there? I hope everything is getting better from everything we hear in the news. And I would love, Neha, for a little local angle from your angle. We're talking about accessible transportation for all. How does it look on your end?
Sure. So thanks, Michal, for the spotlight. I really appreciate it. And yes, things were really, really bad here in the past few months. It's improving for the better, and we're just keeping our fingers crossed that it doesn't go back to the same. So let's hope for the best. And regarding this, like talking about the transportation for all in India, well, we somewhere lie in, it's a contrasting country, right? It's a melting pot of diversity, and that is what exists in terms of accessibility in transportation as well. So we have a lot of accessibility in one place and complete lack of accessibility in another place. So I'll take one after the another. So when we talk of accessibility by air, so accessibility by air is like pretty accessible for all types of disabilities, where whatever the disability you might have. We still don't have sensory rooms at airports, but still for other kinds of disabilities, the airports are completely accessible, just barring small airports and small ATR planes. Coming to the railways, proudly saying, even though we are the largest railway network in the world, we are not accessible. And there's nothing to be proud of that. So the trains are completely inaccessible for people with mobility impairment. For people with blindness also, it is a risky affair to travel on their own. People do that. People adapt because there is, of course, no choice. Thanks to the diversity in the economic strata of the kind of people we have. But they've started, thanks to the RPWD Act that was passed way back in 2017, we are moving towards accessibility slowly and gradually. They've started making the stations accessible. I don't know what they will do. People don't go to visit just the stations. They need to travel by train as well.
It's a start.
It's a start, yes. We are thankful for that. Let's see when we get to the trains. Coming to the buses, well, in some of the bigger cities only, we have low-floor buses available, like the metro cities. But even though the infrastructure exists, the training does not, and sensitization doesn't exist. So they won't stop at the right place at the bus stand, or they won't know, or because they're so crowded at times, they won't be able to open the ramp or things like that. So the practical challenges exist over the time, right? So, and that is only city buses that are available. Intercity transport and bus still is not accessible at all for people with mobility impairment.
Right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. And I know that we have a lot to hear more about India, and I really, really hope we can incorporate you or other speakers from India in the next time. But thank you so much for being here and joining us.
Can I take 1 minute to tell about the most accessible way of transport in India, which needs mention, which I was about to end with?
Go for it. I'm giving you a minute.
Thank you so much. So while I was talking about all the inaccessibility, we have one of the best metro trail network in some of the metro cities in the world, in India. So because we took a leap and the metro train network in the bigger cities came in just 25 years ago, they are the most accessible in terms of infrastructure for all types of disabilities, and including they provide human support and tracking of travelers with disabilities while they are hopping from one station to another. So that is one brilliant feat, and I should say I'm really proud of that.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing. And now I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker. So we heard her last time when we did a webinar on inclusive, accessible smart cities. And now we asked her to come back and do focus on trains. So I'm very, very happy to introduce Yael Shomron, the Global Marketing Manager at Step Here, who has 2 decades experience in marketing and has held key marketing and business development positions in social impact enterprises. And today, as I said, she'll speak about Step Here's solution for smart accessibility at trains, trams, and metro systems. Yael, please.
Thank you, Michal. I will start with describing myself. I'm a white female with brownish hair and a white shirt and a bluish jacket. So I am sharing my screen. Please tell me if you can see it.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So as Michal said, today I'm going to focus on Step Here's, specifically on Step Here's solution for trains, trams, and metro systems. And I'm going to start with showing you some data that we got from the Ministry of Transportation here in Israel. And the most important thing is to see annual average rides per person, which is 86, versus 3.8 average rides per person for people with disabilities. So similar to what Victor said about taxis in New York, people are avoiding using public transportation, or in this case, the train system. Another interesting number is people with blindness are the opposite. They're using more rides per year. And this is because they have, first of all, no alternative but public transportation since they can't drive. They receive also free rides from the train system, and they can order escort assistance. Which leads me to my next slide about challenges for people with disabilities in the public transportation. As we see it, and as our mission in Step Here is, the challenges are to be able to move around in public transportation with independence, dignity, and safety. And independence, if, for instance, if people with blindness need to have an escort, they're not as independent as they would like to be. And safety is especially important in places like a train platform or close to it. So about Step Here's technology, we had a evolution because we started and we still are mainly a technology for wayfinding by audio guidance for people with blindness or visual impairment. We also have different features of assistance by IoT, and then the population is also people with mobility disability. And our newest developments are smart system for public transportation. And then we're expanding to even more people. And actually, some of our features could be for all people. So an overview of our technology, where we have Step Here free app. It has multiple features because it connects to various devices that we install in public places and public transportation. It's working the same for Android or iOS, and it's natively accessible. And we also have a solution for people that don't use smartphones, which is a wrist activator, personal wrist activator. And in my presentation, everything I say about the application is also true for that. So how do we, in Step Here, remove barriers in public transportation? It's not only on the vehicle itself, it's also in the bus or tram stops, or in the train or metro or tram stations, which are the complex buildings and platforms. But the most important thing is the connectivity. The connectivity to the vehicle while the passenger is still waiting at the stop, or the opposite, while being on the vehicle, connectivity to the stop. So because the wayfinding is part of the system for the public transportation, at least at the bus stops, tram stops, train stops, and stations, just a quick word about our wayfinding, which is based on a device called an audio sign. An audio sign is a smart loudspeaker with several recordings automatically activated only when a person with an application is close by. It's activated by Bluetooth connection. The guidance can be received from the phone, from the audio sign, or from both, according to what the user prefers. But why is it important to have an audio sign? It's essential for people with blindness or visual impairment, since if the guidance is only from the phone that is connecting by Bluetooth, the person can be in a range of 10 to 20 meters. And external sound is essential because then there is an audio anchor for people with blindness or visual impairment to find a specific point, such as a door to a building or a tram stop on the sidewalk, and an indication also exactly where to stand and where to face to get the audio guidance directions correctly. Today, Step Here devices, mainly the audio signs, are in thousands of locations in places like universities, malls, retail outlets, hospitals, parks, municipalities, and more. And now we're getting to the train system. Now we're currently implementing it in the light rail in Jerusalem, which is actually a trans system, and it starts for the user before starting their journey, picking their desired destination, and then the system knows which stop they need, which line they need, and which stop they need to alight. This is not a novelty, but it's important because from this point, there is no need for the user to touch the app anymore. All the functions will be activated automatically. It's very important for safety for people with blindness because they need to focus on all the surrounding signals, all the surrounding signs. So which barriers are we trying to remove? First of all, finding the stop on the street. This is mostly difficult for people with visual impairment or blindness. Also, which lines to arrive and when. And is the line that arrived just now my desired line? So our solution is, first of all, audio guidance and external sound indication of the stop on the street, real-time audio information, and audio push alerts 2 minutes before my line arrives, so I know to get ready. This is also important for people using wheelchairs to get ready on time, and for people with cognitive disability, because they really need the assurance that they're in the right place and they're having the right line. Also, we're facing the barrier of finding the closest door on a long tram for people with blindness. Also, pushing the button, finding the button to push to open the door. And the solution is audio indication above the relevant door. It's only for the door closest to the app user and only for the desired line, and automated opening of the relevant door, so they don't need to push the button. It's also very useful for people with mobility disability. And the next barrier is missing the train, since it takes longer to get on it. And the way we solve it is longer opening time of the relevant door that's closest to the user, automated camera display for the driver of the relevant door, and the driver also receives a message before he gets to the stop that a person with disability is waiting for him. This is also relevant for old people that takes them longer to go to board the vehicle. On the vehicle itself, when to alight and finding the closest door and pushing the button to open the door is important for people with blindness, for people with using wheelchairs and so on. And the solution is audio push alert to the user before their desired stop, audio indication above the relevant door, and which is the closest door to the user on the stop that he needs, and automated opening of that relevant door. Also, missing the stop, since it takes longer to alight, we solve by longer opening time of the door and automated camera display for the driver. And when reaching a large station, which side is the relevant exit? Finding my way in a complex station, we have audio guidance to the desired exit from the vehicle of the door and audio guidance to points of interest in the station with our audio signs. So this is how it can look in a very large terminal of a train. And today we're implementing this in CAF tram cars that are now being installed in Spain, soon to be operating in the light rail in Jerusalem, starting in the end of this year. We also want to mention our project from going on 2 years for accessible buses in 3 cities in Israel. And this is it. Thank you.
Yael, thank you very much. And I can't wait to hear and see what else you're going to pull out of your sleeves. Really amazing. For years, you guys have really developed amazing things for the benefit of people with disabilities here in Israel and around the world. So thank you very much. Our next speaker, I'm very, very happy to introduce Ron Petit, the Director, Disability Inclusion and ADA Compliance at Royal Caribbean Group. Now, Ron, I don't know how much you know of this, but we have been courting you for quite a while, really, really wanting to have you on board. We have heard such amazing things about what's going on in your organization. And I am very, very happy and thankful that you're joining us today. It's very relevant and very right for this subject. But I'm telling you right now, it's not instead of a face-to-face visit to our next conference, because we want you here in Israel presenting even furthermore. I'm very, very happy to introduce you and hear the amazing stuff that you guys are doing. Please.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today. So I would love to talk a little bit about what Royal Caribbean Group is doing for accessible cruising now and in the future. My name is Ron Petit, and I'm the Director for Disability Inclusion, ADA Compliance. A little bit about me. I'm a white male. I have dark brown hair and eyes. I am wearing very stylish glasses and wearing a black shirt. Behind me is a picture of our private destination, Perfect Day at Coca Cay, which I'll be talking about in just a few minutes. Royal Caribbean Group is a family of cruise lines, and many of you know us in our global cruise brands, Royal Caribbean International, Celebrity Cruises, and Silver Sea Cruises. We also have 2 other cruise lines in our family, TUI Cruises and Hapag-Lloyd, which are catered to the German market. So in terms of framing our conversation today about accessible cruising, I want to reference 2 reports that came out in the last 6 months. One was talking from Leonard Cheshire and partner with Expedia Group about breaking down barriers to travel. And then there's another report that came out from the World Travel and Tourism Council about inclusive and accessible travel guidelines. So I use these reports to they're great reference tools. And a few minutes after my presentation, I'll send you guys the links to those reports so you can look at them. What I wanted to do is frame our conversation today a little bit about under 4 principles. One is accessible guest experiences. How do we make information clear to our guests? We want to talk a little bit about inclusive customer service and how we include people with disability in our process. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is some of the things that we offer to our guests with disabilities. We offer accessible staterooms. So this one you hear on the screen is an accessible Crown Loft Suite, and this is for our Royal Caribbean International brand. I remember coming to Royal Caribbean 15 years ago, and they said, Ron, you're going to work on Project Genesis, which became Oasis of the Seas, and now we have Wonder of the Seas, which will debut next year. So most of our Royal Caribbean ships have an iconic feature called the Viking Crown Lounge. It is a 360-degree views around the smokestack. For Oasis of the Seas, it's like a ship on steroids. So they made the Viking Crown huge, and they actually put suites there instead of a lounge. And so what happened is you got these 2-story urban loft suites with stairs. So we made one of them fully accessible for people with disability by installing an elevator in the suite, which you can see in the picture with the wheelchairs coming out of the elevator. And there are accessible restrooms on both levels for easy access for our guests. So we do track utilization of these staterooms, and accessible staterooms are used about 90% by people with disabilities, which shows you that people with disabilities do have money and do want to spend money on a nice accommodation such as an accessible suite. Another stateroom that I wanted to highlight today was talking from our Celebrity Cruises brand. This is called Edge Stateroom with Infinite Veranda. So what you can see happening here is that the stateroom floor is flush with the balcony floor. So if you've ever been on a cruise ship, you know how sometimes a balcony is accessed. It's a ramp to go up to the balcony threshold and a ramp to go back to the balcony. On Celebrity Edge and our newest ship for Celebrity Apex, which is just started sailing out of Athens, Greece, doing Greek itineraries. These ships now have stateroom floors that are flat out to the balcony. What an amazing concept. And this is universal design at best, because this is not only for accessible rooms, it's for all of our balcony staterooms on the ship. So really great stuff that we're doing here at Royal Caribbean Group. We host a lot of other accessible features on our ship. This is talking about the pool lifts on our Royal and Celebrity ships. We have one pool lift and one whirlpool lift for easy access into the water activities. So we talk a little bit about what we offer for our guests with mobility disabilities, but I want to go beyond. So about 7 years ago, Royal Caribbean and Celebrity Cruises became the world's first autism-friendly cruise line. We've been catering to families with autism for years, but we put together a program. It's sort of a la carte. People can do as much as they want or as little as one, depending on their particular needs. The really great thing about this program is that it really highlights the business case for accessibility at a cruise line. So in the United States alone, there's 1.5 million people with autism on the spectrum. And then when you add their family members, that's almost 5 million people market for us. And we barely scratched the surface, but really, I can tell you, every year since we did this program, we have doubled the number of guests with autism sailing with us. That's an amazing concept and about how it affects the bottom line for our company. So I talk a little bit about how we made our ships accessible. Our guests want to see the world, and we do that with accessible shore excursions. We really have some really great products out there, and talk a little bit about panoramic city tours, all the way to the private customized tours that talk about you get your own driver, you get your own guide with an accessible vehicle, and your tour itinerary can be customized. Now we have a new program called Accessible Travel Solution Tours, and it's a very affordable and immersive way of seeing the destination. ATS is a company based here in the United States, and its owner is a wheelchair user, and he and his team has personally vetted each and every one of these tours that we do. So our guests can see the world at the different ports of call. So I wanted to talk about Perfect Day. You know, the backdrop behind me is Coco Cay's Beach Club. These are private destinations. We have two of them, one in Coco Cay and the other one is in Labadee, Haiti. We did a multi-million-dollar renovation in Coco Cay 2 years ago, and we made the island much more accessible. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we offer here at Perfect Day at Coco Cay. The island is so huge, so now we have trams that go around the entire island, and these trams are accessible. You can see in the picture, actually, that's Claudia España. She's on my team, and she is a wheelchair user, and she's enjoying Perfect Day at Coco Cay. We have the largest freshwater pool in North America with our Oasis Lagoon, and there we have 2 pool lifts, as well as a slope entry into the pool for easy access into great pool activities. So Coco Cay is majority sand. There's a lot of sand everywhere. So beach wheelchairs are a must for our guests in wheelchairs or have difficulty walking and getting around the island and navigating the sandy beaches. So that talks a little bit about how we made our guest experience inclusive all the way from onboard experiences to our ports of call and as well as our private destinations. So we view as one of the other, remember I talked about 4 pillars, making our guest experience accessible. Now we want to make sure that information is clear to our guests. I'm always a firm believer that the more information that you provide to our guests, they can make informed decisions. So we put a lot of information on our website, much more than I can talk about in the 15 minutes I've got here today. So all the information I'm sharing with you can be found on our websites. And we also have PDF brochures. You see a picture of the Royal Caribbean brochure on the screen. It's about 20 pages long, and it's really chock full of information about the accessible cruise experience for our guests and contact numbers, how they can contact us if they need help. I'm going to show you another website and brochure from our sister brand, Celebrity Cruises. And again, we provide lots of information for our guests so that they can make informed decision and understand how cruising can be accessible for them. So the third pillar of the conversation today I want to talk about is inclusive customer service. And here we're talking about providing caring and accessible service. To do this, we have a specialized access department that is majority of my team, and there's over 20 people dedicated to the disability market. It started about almost 25 years ago with one person. It's grown to 20 people. And so this department helps our guests and travel agent partners plan accessible cruise vacations and accessible shore excursion. They can reach us in a variety of ways, whether it's by phone call or email or by fax. Yes, people still do faxes. So we try to make sure that people can access to all different channels. And this is really important for us because we really want to make sure that people have the extra help they need to plan their cruise vacations. So the thing that I always think about Royal Caribbean and what we do, we're just more than a transportation company. We're really about hospitality, and we're really about making vacations happen for people. You know, when we think about the disability community, all of us here on this call today, we're all advocates. We're always talking about how do we provide access to transportation, to medical care, to employment. I think that people with disability have a right to have a vacation. And I think that's also important about how we work and how we live. We ought to have to take a vacation. And my other personal goal is, and I think it's yours too, I want people to have a vacation from their disability. Now, that means I can't make them walk or I may be able to hear, but I want to make that vacation effortless and easy. I don't want them to have to fight to get through the doors on my ship or get into the pool or watch our wonderful Broadway shows. I want it to be effortless, easy so that they can focus on making a great vacation with their family and their friends and have memories to come. So that's really important for us here at Royal Caribbean Group and all across our brand. And how do we make cruising accessible for everyone? And so the last point that I wanted to talk about today was really talking about including people with disabilities. So remember, we've always heard the phrase, nothing with us, without us. So we take the opportunity to include people with disabilities. So on the screen here, you see a lot of people, and this is from our advisory boards at the ADA anniversary luncheon on Navigator of the Seas about 2 years ago. This represents not only but one, but three advisory boards that we have regarding accessibility. We have a disability advisory board. It started out as guests but now we're dealing with employment for people with disabilities. It's turned into that as well. So we have a disability advisory board made of people with different disabilities. And they represent different organizations, whether it be local in South Florida or national U.S. organizations. And they give us advice on how we can do better in terms of serving people with disabilities on a cruise ship and in the workplace. We have a second advisory board that is Autism Advisory Board. It's a very specialized group of people with experts, parents, people on the spectrum, And why do we have this advisory board? Because we're an autism-friendly cruise line. The great message I got from people was, Ron, we love you that your company has come out of the closet and really said, we want to welcome you and your families on board. And they said, and by the way, here's how you can do it better. So I decided to put together autism experts and help us to figure out how can we improve the experience for people with autism. And it's not just autism. The program appeals with anybody with a developmental disability. The first question I get, is it only for autism? And the answer is no. The answer is it's for people with Down syndrome and other developmental and cognitive disabilities. It's a really great program for our guests. And then the third advisory board that we have is Accessible Travel Agent Advisory Board. And this is really great because there's a lot of travel agents out there that specialize in this arena, accessible travel, accessible cruises. And we wanted to take advantage of building strong relationships with those accessible travel agents, many of whom have disabilities as well. And I think that's a really great asset or opportunity for people with disability to consult with the experts in planning their accessible cruise vacations. So in the end of the day, we're talking about including people with disabilities in our program, and this is how we do it. So I spent a lot of time talking about the now of accessible cruising, and I was asked to do future of accessible cruising. This is the only slide. There are no pictures after this. And it's just sort of, here are some really quick thoughts about what the future of accessible cruising looks like. It's going to be an evolution. The cruise industry was one of those few industries that launched onto the disability market. I can remember Richard Fain, our chairman, said that, in the early 70s that, cruise line didn't really market to families. They did not market to people with disabilities. And they then realized that we were missing the boat. Literally, used a bad pun. It's literally missing the boat when they didn't target to families and they didn't target to people with disabilities because they want to sail. So that became the mission of Royal Caribbean to provide accessible cruising. I joined Royal Caribbean because and I've taken it to the next level of being an industry leader in providing accessible cruise vacation experiences. I think that because what we do, we're innovative. We do things that no other cruise line. So we're always constantly reimagining the accessible experience for our guests. And we have special initiatives like the Autism Friendly program. And we want to close the gaps for these things. We're not perfect. We have still some opportunities for improvement. And I think that's going to happen. And along with technology, technology is different today than it was even 5 years ago. There are things that we can do today that we couldn't do years ago. Things like audio description, wayfinding, all those really things that we really can take advantage of and layer into our cruise experience. And one of the things I wanted to mention was we're not just here talking about the marketplace. My team has really got into the employee experience and making Royal Caribbean a great place to work for people with disabilities. We're also talking about digital accessibility, making sure our websites and mobile applications are accessible. We've even touched upon supplier diversity. We want to work with companies that are disability owned. So it's really making the company being very fully disability inclusive, and by not just tackling the whole thing about marketplace, it is tackling the employee experience and all those other areas. And the last point that I wanted to really make before I close today is talk a little bit about, the past year of COVID-19. We've learned a lot in this past year. And, I love this quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, our U.S. president, who also is a person with a disability. And he said, smooth seas do not make a skilled sailor. And I think that is so true in the experience that we've had this past year. It is through adversity. And I think people with disabilities have always had this. We've always dealt with adversity and obstacles, and we get very creative in how we overcome those obstacles. So cruising is back. I'm really excited to say that because you guys know this. We've had a ship sailing from Singapore, Quantum to Sea, since last December. About 65,000 people have sailed since then. And last month in June, we started our comeback program where we return to cruising. And what's really important for people to know is that we have not only demonstrated, but we have proven that cruising can be healthy and safe. And I think that is the true testament of our experience this past year. And that's about all I have for today. So I really wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to accessible cruising and the wonderful things we do. So thank you very much, Michelle, Yuval, Noah, for the great opportunity to be here. And I'm so glad to be here today.
Thank you, Ron, very, very much. And again, as I said, this is a great preview. Next time we want you in person. Better yet, I'd love to come to the cruise, but that's a different story. We'll talk about it offline. Thank you very, very much. And now we heard here about accessibility of cars, of buses, of golf carts, or whatever the name was in Toyota, which was amazing. We spoke about train, about cruise lines. We can go to doctors, to supermarkets, to work, etc. with these transportational means. But when we are talking accessibility, we are talking accessibility in all areas of life. And people with disabilities do not want only to go to the mandatory have to go to places. They want to enjoy life, nature, hikes, like everyone else. And for that, you also need a mean of transportation. And this is the amazing next speaker who has taken Friends of Access Israel, Phaser, all the way to Kilimanjaro with probably, Jamie, it's the first delegation of people with and without disabilities that went all the way to the top, right?
The first and the largest by a long shot.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. I'm signing up to the next trip, and it is great to hear from you, Omer Tsur. He is the founder, or do we say inventor, of the Paratrek. And I'd love, Omer, to hear from you. And Jamie, thank you for the inspiration. And you and Omer will do a great job next week with the next hiking with Paratrek in the US. Please, Omer.
Thank you very much, Michal. First of all, I want to say that it's super interesting what's going on here. So I'm really honored to be a part of this webinar. I'm just going to describe myself. I'm a white male, ginger beard, short hair, dark blue shirt, and behind me, the wall of my bedroom, which is a off-white cream. And it's important to say that because it took my wife a long time to decide of this color. So everybody that spoke here spoke about transportation. And when we think of transportation, we think of airplanes, trains, buses, but there's one aspect that we didn't think, that we didn't speak about, and usually we don't think about it, and I'll speak about it in a moment. But when we think of people with disabilities, do we even try and think of them outside of the city? Well, Yuval said when he spoke at the beginning of this webinar, he wants to see people go from anywhere to everywhere, just like anyone else. And that was those were Yuval's words. And I think that the solutions that I heard here, that I heard almost everybody. So I'm sorry I missed a few minutes. So I'm sorry if I'm going to speak about something that someone already spoke about. The solutions here were amazing. But what happened when we step out of the plane, or when we step out of the train or our vehicle? Is the city accessible? Are the sidewalks well maintained? Does people, they make sure that they don't park their cars or bicycles in the middle of the sideway, the sidewalk? So here we need to change perspective. We need to change people's perspective and the way people think. And I'm going to share my presentation here. Just a minute. Okay, so get to here, and here I'm just going to explain what can we see here. We see the spaceship of Virgin and the crew right before they go up on top and out to the outer to the sky and to space. And we see here an illustration of a child in a wheelchair that wants to join them. So to get to this point where we can say people with and without disabilities are equal and we can go to space together, we first need to go back to the beginning. We need to go back to basics. So here in this picture, you can see pretty much the beginning of everything, the way I see it. In this picture, you can see a group of people with and without disabilities sitting in the middle of nowhere, and it's super not accessible. And they sit around a bonfire. And you can see here a group of 10, 12 guys, and one of them sits in a wheelchair. And when we think of this, that this mixed group is sitting here, then we start thinking of, wait, what else can we do together? So, sorry. This is where we start changing our perspective towards what is disability? What is a person with disability? How can we be more inclusive as a society? So 13 years ago, I started this journey called Paratrek. It was me and my father. And here in this picture, you can see me standing right behind my father. My father, about 47 years ago, he got severely injured. He broke his neck, and since then he's paralyzed from the chest down, and he sits in a wheelchair. And we decided that we want to challenge what is the regular aspect of people with disabilities going around the world. And we said that we want to see the world, and that he will make it possible, that he will just explore everything and everywhere. And we decided that we're going to make other people possible to dream higher and achieve those goals. And we designed this weird looking wheelchair that you can see in the picture. It's called the Trekker, an all-terrain wheelchair. And with it, we started our journey. And you can see here in the picture, you can see the lowest place on earth, the Dead Sea in Israel. And we're sitting right on top of Mount Sodom here, right next to the Dead Sea. And a group of people with and without disabilities, the trekker in the middle, sitting here together and listening to the tour guide. And we started to climb in our journey towards something that we eventually understood, that it's not about the trekker. It's not about the device that we created or that anyone else created. And we've heard about amazing solutions that people are working on around the globe right now in the past hour and a half or 2 hours. It's not for us. We understood it. It's not about this device. It's not about the trekker, but it's about the way people think. And this is what we're going to change. And we started working with with groups from very, very young age. And in this picture here, you can see a collage of 4 different pictures of different groups in different terrains. It is a group of friends or school or group of individuals that just came together to see the world. And we started, even when we understood that we have to change perspective, we started to go from first graders, like to go to a very, very young kids, young children. And from there to let them know, to let them understand that they need to grow together as an inclusive society or a bunch of friends. So you can see here first grader, 6th graders, and 12th graders climbing up these mountains. This specifically is Masada, the snake path of Masada in Israel. If you ever been here, we came all the way to Petra in Jordan, and we climbed about a year and a half ago on February in a very interesting and amazing an emotional journey and expedition with Access Israel and Phaser, Friends of Access Israel, and we got to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And here in the picture, you can see 3 team members of this expedition. Me on the left side, and Roy on the right side, and Marcela sits on the trekker on top of a Stella Point, on top of Mount Kilimanjaro. The next picture, you can see the whole delegation, 26 of us with 4 trekkers and the porters and the guides and everybody right before we climbed up to the summit. So I want to conclude by just what I had in these few minutes that I spoke about is that all the devices, all the solutions, everything that we're work on is actually are amazing solutions, but we need to add one more thing to it. We need to help society understand that it is the job of each and every individual of our society, the global society, to make our world more accessible. Tomorrow, I'm going to land in JFK, and I'm going to spend a little over 2 weeks in New York area. And it's a cooperation with Access Israel and Phaser, Friends of Access Israel. And in these 2 weeks, we're going to hike every day with a different group of people, individuals that will want to come or organize groups. Every day we're going to hike in Rockefeller State Park, and you are all invited to come and enjoy and explore and experience what I just spoke about. We're going to bring 3 trekkers, and we're going to have big groups that are going to hike with us. I want to just to tell you that in this last photo of my presentation, there are my details, my email and phone number, and you can find us and Phaser on the social media, so you can see the schedule for the next 2 weeks, so you can know which day and which part you want, if you want to join us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Access Israel, for this opportunity to take part of this webinar.
Thank you. And as we said, transportation is not just the regular conventional ones. We want to be able to move around from point A to point B, also in rough terrain. And you are providing a great solution for that. So thank you very, very much. And without further ado, I will move to our next speaker. And here we are very, very thankful, I think, to our valuable 500 friends who made the connection. And we were so happy they did. I'm very happy to present Sarah Marchant, the service manager, passenger in Heathrow. She concentrates on passengers requiring support at Heathrow Airport. She is a passenger experience expert, and she'll share today more about accessibility strategy, training and awareness, engagement with charities and support groups, looking for new innovations and technologies, and working with project designers to make new and upgraded areas of the airport accessibility. Sarah, please.
Good afternoon. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much to Access Israel for inviting me this afternoon. I'm very excited to be here, and what an inspirational day it's been. I am a white middle-aged woman to whom COVID has not been kind. I've also recently just moved home, and my internet connection in my office is still unstable. So I'm currently sitting on a basket in the study, which is a dumping ground, I have to admit. And if you just imagine a slightly distraught looking woman in a cave, you've probably got a good idea. So as you're aware, accessibility and aviation is difficult at the best of times, but accessibility in aviation through a pandemic is quite some challenge. We've just released our financial results for the first half of the year, and it's no secret that Heathrow has been hit very hard. We have been losing £5 million a day. And to date, since the beginning of the pandemic, we've lost 2.9 billion. Obviously, investment is really tough at the moment. A few statistics around disability in the UK. I won't linger on these because these will be in the slide deck. We'll send them out to you. And I also have a video which shows some of the COVID measures that we've been taking throughout the pandemic, which I'll be very happy to share with you. I'll add that in later. We also know that even pre-COVID, 7% of passengers in the UK would not travel by air because they were worried about how they'd be treated. So for us, a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last few months is to help passengers understand that it is safe to fly by air. So some of the specific things that we've been doing, we have fitted Perspex screens to all of our buggies so that we can still travel people in a socially distant way. We've released some clear masks to help with lip reading for people who are hard of hearing. And for people who are living with sight loss, we also send agents out to help escort them wearing disposable sleeves or jackets and having disposable gloves to be able to offer to those passengers should they wish them. We also have a free-to-use app on the airport called Ira. Ira works through the camera on your mobile phone, and the person using it will be connected to an agent in real time. And they can use that agent for absolutely anything they want to while they're on the airport site. They can use it for wayfinding. They can use it to have them read them the menu in a restaurant. They can take them shopping to find their favourite brand of whiskey. It's entirely up to them. And then the picture in the bottom right, that is the sunflower lanyard, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a short while. The way that we're regulated forces all of the focus onto passengers who have mobility issues. And for me, that's kind of how my job came about. We refer to those passengers in aviation as PRM, because we do like a good acronym in aviation, which is passengers with reduced mobility. We undertook a very large survey last year. We surveyed 11,500 people, and we asked them to share with us what the challenges were when navigating the airport and what kind of support they needed. And what that's shown us is that it isn't just 1.4% of our passengers who have a mobility requirement. It's actually 39% of our customers on any given day. And that's massive. It's far, far bigger than we think. And in a way, that's kind of how my role came about, because as all of that focus, because of the legislation, is on mobility, I was just the awkward person in the room saying, but what about sight loss? What about dementia? What about autism? What are we doing for that? And so I kind of talked myself into a job which I love. I'm very lucky. I work with some fantastic people and some great charities. So these are the broad groups of category that we found people fell into, and we've used this to help develop a new strategy. We also have a group of people who either are disabled or are very closely linked to it, called the Heathrow Access Advisory Group. And they act as our critical friends. They help to shape our strategy and to move things forward. So the three high-level needs that people told us they wanted, I don't think that we can tell them to trust us. That's something that we have to earn over time. And by listening to what people say and then putting those requests into action and building them into our strategy, that's how we'll build that trust over time. Coronavirus has made that challenging, and where people have conflicting desires and requirements, that's only made it more difficult. But again, we're just continuing to listen to what people tell us they would like and building that in wherever we can. So the sunflower lanyard, we became aware that there were a group of people travelling through the airport who needed some extra help and support, but we couldn't identify them because their disabilities were non-visible. So back in 2016, we created a sunflower lanyard, which people can choose to wear, that just act as a discreet signifier to colleagues around the airport that that person could need a little more help or support, and just encourage them to have a a conversation to ask them if they needed any help today. Since 2016, when that was launched, it's pardon the pun, really taken off. I've worked with about 150 multinational and international businesses to help launch it, because we just need to drive a consistent symbol. We now also have links to America, to Denmark, to Australia. And basically, the more people that use this, the better it gets known and the more people it helps. Feedback that we get from people who use it say they really like it because it gives them the power to choose how much they share in regard to their disability. And also they like it that it doesn't label them, and that they feel that they can ask for help without being judged. So at an airport, what do we do to build back better? Well, like I say, we take all of that feedback. We take all of the information from our surveys. We listen to our critical friends, the Heathrow Access Advisory Group, and we build all of that into our strategy. So I have just submitted my strategy to take us up to the end of 2027, which I'm very excited about. Looking at a few different things, I'm not saying that these will definitely be the right answer for Heathrow, but it's certainly things that we're interested in exploring. So I've just picked out a couple of them to share. An automated wheelchair, really like the sound of that, so that people can self-mobilise. They tell us they want to have a glass of wine, they want to go and buy a handbag in the same way as everybody else. So they can drive themselves around in this very easy to operate wheelchair. And once they've got to the gate room, just press a button and it'll take itself back home. One of the other things that we're looking at is currently every single wheelchair user, when going through security, is subject to a full-on hand search because they will always set off the walk-through metal detector. This is a non-metallic wheelchair. So again, we're just giving passengers the ability to have exactly the same experience as everybody else, which is when they go through the metal detector, if they don't activate it, they just continue with their journey in the same way as everybody else. And a lot of what I try to do at Heathrow is about giving people choice, giving them the choice to interact, the choice to self-mobilise, the choice to touch something, the choice not to. So that is a quick demonstration of some of the things that we've been doing at Heathrow. Like I say, I'm very happy to share that slide deck, and I'll add in the video for anybody who's interested. But thank you ever so much for the invitation. It's been a lovely afternoon.
Thank you so much. Health. And can't wait to come to Heathrow to see everything for myself. And it is great to see it. I can also share that we were in an amazing tour of Austria, Vienna, and we saw the airport there. And to see what you guys are doing is really inspiring. And thank you very much for your efforts and successes, not only efforts. Our next speaker is Shani Giant from Volkswagen Group of America. And she is Dr. Shani Giant, She leads the Inclusive Mobility Initiative at Volkswagen and is a UX research and design manager. Her work focuses on the future of mobility for all people, including those with disabilities, through technology, design, policy, and social change. Today, she'll share with us what is done at Volkswagen. Shani, please.
Hi. Can I share the screen? I think someone else still has it. Yeah.
Sarah, if you can unshare your presentation as good as it was.
I'm trying to. I don't know how to.
It's okay. I also just have like one slide, so perfect. It's all good. All right. Let's see. Okay. You seeing the one slide? And you can hear me? Great.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks to Access Israel for having me. And I'm Shani Giant, as I was just introduced. I want to say good morning here from the Bay Area in California. I'm going to have to definitely catch up on some of the earlier talks since it was really early here. I am a biracial woman. My pronouns are she, her. I have medium length brown hair, a mustard yellow sleeveless shirt, and I'm sitting in front of a shoji screen. I just have one slide showing today, and it's just a title that says Inclusive Mobility at Volkswagen Group of America with my title, my email address, shani.giant@vw.com, and our website, inclusivemobility.com. So yeah, as already introduced, I lead the Inclusive Mobility Initiative at Volkswagen Group of America. My background is in human-computer interaction, computer science, accessibility, and inclusive design. And we really think that, we're in an era of really rapidly changing technology. There's an unprecedented opportunity to redesign how we get around. Automated vehicles have the potential to increase the quality of life for millions of Americans. We're working with Americans, but obviously this is also global, especially older people and people with disabilities, by providing more opportunities for agency and independence in their daily lives. Equity in transportation means having a level playing field for people to do the things that are important to them. Being able to see your friends, your family, go to your job, the doctor, get a haircut, what have you. And, I believe it's an ideal that cannot be reached overnight, but can be worked on piece by piece. And it starts with inclusion by widening the circle of people that are involved in making decisions and designs. So in 2017, we started this initiative, and the mission of the program is to help design vehicles and services that improve transportation and the quality of life for everyone, especially people with disabilities. So we began by asking questions like, who isn't included in our current understanding of whom we are serving? What don't we know? And, empathy can be a really great starting point, but within companies, I think there's a lot of shortcomings to using empathy in a tool in and of itself. We really need to be involved with the people who are underserved in a continuous dialogue to hear about their experiences and not imagine what those experiences might be. So as part of the Inclusive Mobility Initiative, we directly engage with disability groups in the early stages of designing vehicle technologies and mobility services. So this can mean anything from running focus groups, workshops, user studies and interviews, to ride-alongs in vehicles, conducting surveys, and working with disability expert consultants. And so far, we've worked with organizations like the National Federation of the Blind, the National Association of the Deaf, United Spinal Association, the We Will Ride Coalition, the Disability Rights and Defense Fund, and others. We drive the U.S. effort from our Silicon Valley campus, and we're deeply networked within Volkswagen's global organization and integrated into requirements gathering, engineering, and design processes to Germany. So we're collaborating with Volkswagen Group's Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles brand, which partners with Argo AI to develop autonomous vehicles and the technology that will drive them. We also work closely with Volkswagen Group's software brand Cariad. We provide knowledge and feedback for user interfaces and software functions in the digitalized car. So I've mentioned already the huge potential of autonomous vehicles for people with disabilities. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, the context we're talking about is really shared fleets of fully autonomous and electric vehicles. We're also looking at ownership vehicles for people that can currently drive, and accessibility for drivers and passengers in these vehicles as well. So the work we do spans all parts of the vehicle's accessibility, including hardware and software features. So I'd like to just talk about a few examples of some things we're working on. One sec. So we've begun to tackle how the vehicle could...
Shani,
yeah?
You have only one page in your presentation?
Yeah, I'm not showing slides. Okay, it's just the background. Yeah. Thanks for checking though. So we have begun to tackle how the vehicle could communicate with users who are blind, low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, and cognitively impaired, including, for example, working on a screen reader accessible software interface, making sure that audio alerts have parallel visual or tactile counterparts, and minimizing flicker to prevent visually induced seizures. Another topic focuses on various approaches allowing riders with visual impairments to easily locate and board an autonomous vehicle. Beyond these software-based functions, we're also looking at seat concepts and layouts in autonomous vehicles. Some deaf passengers have said they prefer the concept of seats actually facing each other for better face-to-face communication for signing or lip reading. But we also need to consider safety issues and motion sickness probability in moving vehicles. Another topic is looking into how people with manual wheelchairs can independently store their wheelchairs and transfer to seats in vehicles with higher step-ins. Another project we worked on is we have a report that just came out with the National Council on Aging about older adults and their opinions on self-driving ride-hailing in both urban and also underserved rural settings in all 50 states in the US. Overall, most of the respondents had a really positive perception of these services. For the rest of my time, I'd like to talk about just one topic that we've been deeply involved with, which has been wheelchair access and wheelchair securement for automated vehicles. As I'm sure many of you already know, there's a few challenges here. One is getting ramps and lifts into the vehicles for wheelchair entry and exit, especially for those who cannot or don't want to transfer from their chairs. This is an industry-wide challenge. Batteries in the floors of vehicles place constraints on the floor height and where the ramp and lift would normally go in combustion engine vehicles. Another issue is wheelchair securement, having someone in a wheelchair be able to independently secure themselves and their chair in a vehicle. Today, this issue is solved either by having very customized personal vehicles, or in the case of TNCs and buses, having the driver be there to assist with securement. Once the driver is out of the picture, this becomes a complex challenge, as there are many different wheelchairs of different shapes and sizes. If we are trying to solve this for fleets of vehicles that won't have personal customization, it's going to be a large effort to make this a reality. There are no working standards for how wheelchairs can be independently latched into a van that's going in high speeds. So basically, we have a lot of stakeholders we have to work with. And in 2018 and 2019, we hosted two-day roundtables in Washington, D.C., to understand the opportunities and challenges of wheelchair accessible vehicles from a user, industry, and legislative perspective to try to find the right solutions for self-driving vehicles. Some of the stakeholders we had there included the We Will Ride Coalition, the National Mobility Equipment Dealers Association, government agencies, standards bodies, wheelchair manufacturers, wheelchair securement providers, University of Michigan, research institutes, University of Buffalo, and more. And we discussed lots of things like accessible vehicle dimensions, safety standards, compliance requirements, liability, and funding. And, it became really clear that, at least in the US, wheelchair manufacturers need to make significant investments and create new standards for crash-worthy wheelchairs. And in order to trigger these investments, they'd like to see clear signals of commitment from the automotive industry, a new cross-industry standard for a physical docking interface between the wheelchair and the vehicle. And this is something that's being worked on right now at the University of Michigan with a universal docking geometry. And also in the US, we have to look at changes in the way that Medicare and insurance providers cover the transit options on wheelchairs. So, as I said earlier, it's a very big project with many players, and we can't do it alone, and we continue to work on this. Okay, looking forward, one last topic that I just wanted to highlight, I think I'm running out of time, is exploring what other interfaces to assisted devices or tech ecosystems may benefit from standardization. So basically, wheelchairs are getting more intelligent with like augmentative sensors. We need to make sure that these chairs, braille devices, switch controls, hearing aids, all of these are compatible with the cars of the future. So this requires a lot of early planning. And Dig, I just wanted to give a few shout outs. One just for basically a congratulatory shout out for the 31st anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act here in the US, which was yesterday. And just a thanks to all the advocates here in the US that have been really leading the conversation around inclusive mobility globally in many aspects. So I'll end it there. Thank you, Access Israel, for having me speak here today on this important topic. And again, the contact information is here on the slide. If you have any questions, you can email me, shani.giant@vw.com. It's shani.jayant. And our website is inclusivemobility.com. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Shani. We're definitely, I'm definitely going to go into the website and see more and learn more. It sounds great. Our next speaker is from VIA. Gabby McCaig is the Global Head of Community Affairs at VIA. She oversees VIA's efforts to collaborate with and provide support to the local communities on ground where VIA's partners operate, ensuring that these services meet the needs of and are inclusive to people, among others, people with disabilities. She will tell us more about how VIA operates to take the needs and provide the community with practical solutions. So, Gabby, let's hear you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gabby McCaig. I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully that's working okay. And then let me just present. Okay. Thank you so much to Access Israel for having me today. I'm Gabby McCaig. I am a white female with brown hair and brown eyes, and I'm wearing a floral shirt. And I'm talking to you from my husband's office. So behind me are just like loads of football jerseys. I think mostly Liverpool and Celtic. So if anyone wants to chat football afterwards, we can talk football. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the role of transit tech in enabling accessible transportation. And I think it's really fitting to kind of come after Shani was talking a little bit about thinking about vehicle design, as what we do at VIA is we create the software that powers the infrastructure to move public transportation. So thinking about all the different vehicle types and all the different types of public transportation we have, how do we build systems that enable these to be powered very efficiently, very affordably, very sustainably, most important to today's conversation, very accessibly to everybody in the population. So you can see here on this slide, there's a view of a city. It's got loads of different buses and autonomous vehicles and wheelchair accessible vehicles and vans and street infrastructure, thinking about curb cuts and accessible sidewalks and sort of how do all of these components fit together to build a really holistic transportation system that works for everybody. And so what we do here at VIA is we create this software that enables us to kind of digitize these sort of legacy transportation systems and introduce modern technology to help both improve the operator experience in terms of operating transit more efficiently, but most importantly, to improve the passenger experience as well, and create mobility that can really, really accommodate a broad range of users. So the core verticals in which we kind of focus our efforts are on what we call on-demand public transit solutions. So this is very much thinking about, instead of there being a bus where you have to walk to the bus and meet the bus at a very specific time, this is a world where you could summon the public bus through a smartphone app or through a call to a web center, and the bus comes to you where and when you need it and takes you to, directly to your final location. And that can either be something that complements existing fixed route transit as sort of a first last mile solution. It can be something that plugs the gap in a transit desert. So where there is no other public transit, we can have these kinds of dynamic solutions, or where there's potentially underperforming bus routes or bus routes that are just not meeting the needs of the community. Can we leverage this on-demand technology to improve access? We also think a lot about school buses and thinking about how can we provide tracking and routing and visibility and sort of taking advantage of real-time technologies to improve school bus transportation. And paratransit and non-emergency medical transportation are another big vertical for us. So thinking about services that are specifically designed to service folks with a variety of accommodation needs, how can we bring technology into these into these services, many of which, certainly I think in the U.S. context, but we see in many places around the world, often is completely devoid of technology today. A lot of times paratransit services require you to call 24, 48 hours in advance to book your trip. There's no way to track in real time if your bus is on its way to you on time or it's running late or early. And so we can introduce technology into that experience to help make it much more visible and accessible and sort of improved for the riders there. And tying it all together, what we can do with our platform is build one sort of holistic solution which manages all of these discrete transportation verticals in one system, which means we can leverage these technologies and experience sort of universally for the users of that community across the board. And folks can then have the ability to pick and choose the services that are right for them when and where they need it. So, imagine you had sort of one interface as a rider. You could use one app or one phone booking system. And you could say, this is a trip where I really needed to be served by sort of the paratransit service. But this is a trip I want to take using the on-demand service. And so you can have the ability to flexibly choose between these options through this integrated mobility platform. And one of the things that my team really thinks about is, as we're introducing these new technologies, we want to make sure that these technologies are sort of really suited to the unique challenges that a whole spectrum of users face. Obviously, when we're talking about the disabilities community, there's very physical considerations, like are the vehicles that we're able to plug in, can they accommodate a variety of wheelchairs, scooters, different size wheelchairs? There's also thinking about other forms of mobility limitations. How far can somebody walk to a pickup to meet their bus? And how far can they walk on the other end of that? Do they need door-to-door, curb-to-curb service versus, an able-bodied passenger who may be able to walk a further distance to the stop? If we're really going to build public transportation that is inclusive of everyone, we need to be able to take the unique considerations of everybody into account. And so, thinking even beyond just sort of the physical limitations, what about folks who don't have access to smartphones? As we're thinking about, we think, hailing a ride on an app for many of us is like a very common thing that we would do through, regular TNC or taxi service. For some folks, that's not necessarily a possibility. For some folks, not being able to pay through a credit card through an app is not a possibility. So how do we think about, continuing to have cash payments as we move into kind of these modern, innovative services? We need to think about kind of solving all these problems. And the way that we've sort of approached this from a product perspective is thinking about building really, really configurable software, which enables the operator of the service. And so we're licensing our technology typically to either a municipality or a transit agency, and gives that agency at the end the ability to really customize the service around the profile of a rider. And we'll show a little bit what that looks like in a second. But understanding, if we're going to build a mixed fleet, right, that has some wheelchair accessible vehicles, some non-wheelchair accessible vehicles, how do we make sure we're serving the right vehicle to the right user? How do we make sure we have the right accessibility accommodation features if we're talking about a visually or hearing impaired or cognitive impairment? Do we need to communicate that information to the driver so that the driver can take a certain set of actions when he's picking up the passenger? Do we need to have door-to-door service or curb-to-curb service, or can we do, bus stop to bus stop service? And really being able to configure this uniquely to the rider profile. So one of the ways we do this is through the app. We can build a variety of sort of toggle-based functionality so that the individual rider has the ability to control exactly what information they want to share or convey, which would go to both the dispatching agent and ultimately to the driver as well. So in this case, we have a visual showing a wheelchair accessibility toggle, which when the rider toggles that on, we can see that feeds through to the application that the driver has telling them about the pickup. And this can also convey additional information, like the rider is traveling with a service animal or the rider is traveling with a personal care attendant. So that way, when the driver reaches the pickup, the driver is also informed with all the information they need to make that a very seamless and smooth journey for the rider. And, depending on what the transit agency ultimately wants to do from a policy perspective, they can have different policies, that the driver would then follow based on sort of what they think would work best for the rider. This can also be solved, through phone booking. And so here you can see a little bit of the a screenshot of the what we call the operator console. So this is what a booking agent over the phone would be using to take a ride, or this is what we can input at the passenger level for a passenger, which allows us to track all the information we would need that would sort of change the parameters of the service for an individual. So do they have a walker? Are they using, a certain size electric wheelchair? Are they using a collapsible electric wheelchair? How will that all affect the vehicle that we're assigning to that rider to make sure that we've got the right vehicle to pick up the right passenger? Do we need to offer sort of a different pricing or concession scheme for this rider? Are they part of a senior profile? That would have some sort of a different pricing scheme associated with them. All of that can be kind of tweaked and configured here at the rider level, and it will ultimately enable them to sort of leverage the service, ride with somebody who has a different profile for them, and successfully share the public transit experience in a really integrated fashion. And I want to talk a little bit about a case study of this working in practice. So we'll talk a little bit about King County Metro, which is in Seattle, Washington, here in the United States. With King County Metro, we had an existing service, which was not necessarily a disabilities-focused service to begin with. It was what we call a first and last mile transit service. So in these particular suburbs of Seattle, there was a fixed route light rail service. You can see sort of on this map on the right side of the screen has the different train stops that existed. However, they had a severe problem in that it was very difficult to get to these train stops in these communities. There was no other sort of public transit to help connect folks who lived in these neighborhoods to the actual train station. So they created this on-demand transit service called Via Transit, which was specifically designed to take you from anywhere in these suburbs specifically to the train station. That was actually the only place you could book to. It was specifically designed to solve this first last mile connection problem. That being said, when you typically are serving a commute service, right, you do a lot of trips in the morning, you do a lot of trips in the afternoon. And so there's this period throughout the day where you have a lot of these vehicles on the road, and they're not necessarily being fully utilized because there's less commuting that's happening during the day on the light rail service. And so we were saying, what if we kind of leverage these vehicles and we try a pilot where we provide what we call the access service. So this is specifically a door-to-door service, which instead of just taking you only to the train station, would take you from your door to anywhere within this zone. So it could be used to get to the grocery store, to the bank, to your friend's house, anywhere you needed to travel. Could we leverage these vehicles to service specifically a disabilities population as part of kind of this integrated transit experience? So we have one set of riders who are using it for one use case, one set of riders using it for another use case, but otherwise it's exactly the same service. It's the same app. It's the same process to book. It's the same vehicles. Would it work? And so we introduced this program, and found it was not only hugely successful and folks really, really, really loved the experience. This was a community who had previously only had access to a pre-scheduled paratransit service where they had to book 24 to 48 hours in advance of their trip, now suddenly having the ability to say, hey, I actually want to go to the grocery store this afternoon, and I didn't think about it 2 days ago. I can just hail a trip and go to the grocery store. So it not only introduced that on-demand element, it introduced app-based booking, vehicle tracking, all of these great services, but it also provided a huge cost savings to the city, actually. It was a substantially different economic model to service these trips versus servicing these trips through this old, underutilized kind of legacy paratransit situation. So the pilot was so successful, they're sort of expanding it now, looking towards the future. And I think it's just a really interesting way that we can think about leveraging these technologies to sort of change the scope of accessible transportation here in the U.S. And the other example I'll just kind of talk about very quickly is Hampton Roads Transit. This is a traditional paratransit service that we operate in Hampton, Virginia. And here, this was another one where you had to book 48 hours in advance. You can only use a call center to book. There was no way to track your vehicle in real time, and there was no real-time technology being used to sort of think about how we smartly route these vehicles. So if traffic patterns changed in the city, nothing changed in your booking to sort of make that trip better for you. And so by introducing this technology, we not only were able to give passengers real-time access into tracking their vehicle, booking their rides, all these sort of very important features, but we were actually also able to introduce improvement into the actual efficiency of the reducing the actual trip duration for passengers by a huge percentage. So you were spending less time just sitting on board this vehicle and actually increasing on-time performance for the vehicles as well. So that's everything I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about today.
Amazing. And we will be able to upload the presentation in our international website, right?
Yes, definitely.
So I am inviting you and, of course, everybody here. If you haven't signed on to our international website, and Noah will put the link momentarily, please do. You will be able to find there the presentations from the various speakers, the contact information, emails, etc. So the connection will continue. The ripple effect will continue. Thank you so much for your presentation, Gabby. And we're looking forward to seeing more of VIA. So thanks a lot. And now I am very, very happy to introduce a new dear friend who already we have so many mind-blowing ideas and connections growing from this friendship. I'm very, very happy to introduce Fred Maas. Fred is the CEO of and founder of Maas Travels. He spent the last 30 years as a corporate executive working for Fortune 100 and Fortune 30 companies while traveling the world and building his expertise and reputation as an internationally recognized keynote speaker, disability advocate, and accessibility travel and tourism expert. He lately founded Maas Travels, which works across the globe to refine accessible travel, provide many other accessibility services, and he will tell us about the intersection between accessible tourism and transportation. Fred, passing it on to you. And the most heard sentence in Zoom history, you are on mute.
Yeah, I know, right? And I am muted. Well, first of all, thank you, Michal, for having me today. And thank you, Access Israel, Yuval, Friends of Access Israel, Jamie. And thanks to all of the just wonderful speakers that we've had today. I've learned a lot of things and I'm looking forward to collaborating and partnering with each of you. So I want to take a little bit of a turn here. We've got a very broad audience and speakers, some with and some without disabilities. So I want to take a step back and really talk about the benefits of accessible travel, transportation from a different angle, slightly different angle. So, we've had lots of statistics here today. So if we think about, on average, there are about, 20% of the population, the world's population, having some type of disability. So roughly about 1.4 billion people with a disability. And that number is growing, right? We're statistically, we're living longer. That number is growing. So the needs for people with disabilities is going to not only continue to grow, but those needs are going to need to innovate. We have to think of different ways to best serve the disability population. And I think folks here today have shared a lot of great ideas. The other thing to think about from a pure business perspective is that population of people has over $8 trillion, that's with a T, in disposable income for travel and entertainment alone. But they're only spending about 43% of it. So that means there's quite a bit of financial resources being left on the table, right? And why is that? It's because they either don't know what things and places and modes of transportation are accessible, or the places that are, the things that are are not promoting it. They're not doing a good job of telling people about, their hidden secret of accessibility. And I've run into that far too many times. I've traveled all over the world, since my accident. I was 18, had a diving accident, broke my neck and became paralyzed. I've used a wheelchair ever since. And I've experienced lots of different meanings, interpretations of the word accessibility. And I'm glad that we're moving forward. As was mentioned a few minutes ago, we just celebrated yesterday the 31st anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act here in the U.S. But we all realize that we've got a lot of work to do, a lot more work. And part of that work is collaborating with people all over the world, such as yourselves. We have a lot of countries represented on the call today. So keeping all of that in mind, and stepping out of the physical things that benefit or are meaningful towards people with disabilities. Let's think about the other benefits, such as the psychological benefits of having accessible transportation or just having accessibility. It promotes your sense of independence. It gives you that ability to travel with friends or family or even alone. It also reinforces your self-esteem. So again, as you take a step back and for people who do not have a disability, and so I have the unique opportunity to remember, what it was like before my own disability, and think about the things you take for granted, right? You wake up in the morning, you jump up, you get cleaned up, you get dressed, and you go to work or whatever it is you're doing during the day. But for people with disabilities, it's different, right? There's some things that they need to plan for and do before they get to their activities of the day and get to their transportation. So it's a process. So having that freedom, that accessible transportation, that accessibility overall really is beneficial psychologically. And then let's look at it from a social aspect. When you get to travel and you wherever you get to travel, it forces you out of your comfort zone, especially when you're in a new place. It forces you to interact with others, right? You're asking questions. You're trying to maybe try different food or try a different activity, and so it provides you with memories and knowledge, and it enhances your creativity, and it also increases your cultural knowledges, right? But while it's all doing that, it increases your cognitive functions. So it's providing the brain with stimuli. So it's good for your brain. And according to the Spanish Society of Neurology, recent studies have shown that travel provides different environmental stimuli that is good for the health of your brain. And it's good for the health of your brain. It's good for your overall, your overall health. And again, that leads to this whole idea of people living longer. So again, as we're living longer, the needs are going to increase. We need to innovate more and more. So we have to keep all of this in mind. And then, of course, traveling requires learning and memorizing the unknown until it becomes normal and familiar. And this is a challenge for your brain and is like intense training, right? It's important for you to train and stimulate the brain because over time, the more connections mean that you have greater cognitive reserve, and then thus making your brain more resilient to aging, and et cetera. So those are all of the psychological, social things that are good for your brain. Now, let's talk about why it's good for the economy, right? We heard a little bit earlier about having accessible transportation means it's more likely that you're able to get to a job. And if you're able to get to a job, then you're not only in a position of independence and freedom, et cetera, but you're also contributing back to your community by paying taxes. right? So there are all these ripple effects of just having access to transportation. And then if you're contributing back to your society, your community, more business means more jobs for everyone, not just people with disabilities. If, as a business, you're accessible and you provide accessible transportation or whatever it may be, it's enhancing your company brand, your company image. So if you're enhancing your company brand and image and you're doing things for people with disabilities by being accessible, more people are likely to purchase or use your services, meaning it's affecting your bottom line. Overall, we're promoting inclusion and accessibility. And again, it's triggering more trust and loyalty. So again, I just wanted to take a step away from the physical things that accessibility and accessible transportation, et cetera, are contributing, which are all critically important. But take a look at the other side of things and why it's so important that we talk about the non-physical things that are affecting us and therefore affect the community. And I think if we think of this holistically, I think we're going to do a lot better and a lot more to help the people with disabilities all over the world. That's all I have.
Thank you, Fred. Always great to hear from you. And again, looking forward to all the amazing plans that we have in store together. So thank you very much for that insight. And now I'm very happy to invite our next speaker, Nirit Glaser from Looking Bus. She is the co-founder and CEO of Looking Bus. Looking Bus is a technology that helps bus agencies take a step forward towards accessibility to better support riders with disabilities. Nirit is on a mission to improve public transportation and is enthusiastic to continue creating innovative solutions wherever they are needed. So Nirit, can't wait to hear you.
Hi, thanks, Michal and Access Israel for having me. And I'm really glad you put me immediately after Fred, because I'm really connected to what Fred mentioned. Fred mentioned the need to innovate and do more and more. And the theme of my talk is basically that it's important to innovate, but not at the price of excluding people. So basically, my theme is no one should be excluded from modernization. And I will just share my slide. And so basically, my talk is about providing solutions for now and always. And I'm specifically about inclusive and accessibility for public transportation and fixed route buses. So first, I would like to describe myself. So I'm a white female. I have a dark hair, and I wear glasses, and I wear beige short. And I'm located in California, United States right now. So good evening, good morning, everyone. And this image shows a person stranded at the stop. And as a community that put into mission to improve the accessibility for people with disability, I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the frustration and the pain of being stranded at the stop again and again. Actually, all the idea of Looking Bus started from a personal story of a friend that shared with us the pain of being stranded at the stop and the impact that it's created on his ability to hold a job. And basically what we are doing, we are helping bus company to stop stranding people at the stop. Now, the next image is showing a person that is very, very confused in a bus stop when multiple buses approaching, and he has a mobility limitation. And by the time he figure out which bus to go, the bus already left the stop and he is stranded at the stop. And the next image is show an additional typical example of people with visual impairment that not always know where exactly to stand in order to be visible for the driver. Now, at Looking Bus, that's exactly what we are tackling. We notify the driver that a person with a disability is waiting at the stop, and basically we extend the range of the accessibility because the rider needs to be nearby the stop, not necessarily at the exact location to be visible. And then in parallel to this, we also notify the rider that his particular specific bus is approaching. So then the rider can keep, will not be excluded from weather and other impacts. So he could wait with other people, for example, under the roof when there is rain or snow, and just approach the curve side when he gets a message that the bus is approaching. And now the next image is showing a lady with a mobility disability that chasing the bus, arriving the last minute to the stop. So all of us familiar with this situation that sometimes we just arrive at the last minute and people with disability are not able to chase the bus and left behind. So basically our technology is waving down on behalf of these riders, letting the driver know that they are nearby the stop so the driver can make sure to get them on safely. And now we are talking about moving forward and modernization. So the next image show a regular bus that with all the limitation, at least people with visual impairment can hear the bus. But while we're moving to modernization, so the zero emission buses, which we support very much, they're rolling into service and they are very environmental friendly, but at the same time, they also raise an obstacle for people with visual impairment that they are no longer can hear clearly that the bus is approaching the stop. And then with our tool, basically, we mitigate this challenge of not hearing that the bus is approaching because both the rider gets a message that the bus is approaching, but also the driver gets a message and can make sure that the rider is getting on the bus. And a lot of presenters talked today about the autonomous shuttles. But the main message is that no one should be excluded from modernization. And with autonomous shuttle, looking into the future, that there will be no safety operator in the shuttle. So someone needs to know that someone with disability is waiting at the stop to open the ramp, initiate like video communication. So for this technology, we added also, in addition to the regular mobile solution that we use for fixed route, we also have a solution that is sensor-based, having roadside units and onboard units installed on the bus stops and on the shuttle. And then they basically communicate with each other. And the smart bus stops basically alert the shuttle that someone with disability is at the stop, so the shuttle can stop in accessible location and make sure that everyone getting on safely. And then we are not only taking care of getting on the bus safely, we also helping the driver to better serve the riders when they need to get off. So everyone will get off peace of mind. And this image show a crowd bus, like regular rider like myself usually start to approach the back door before the bus reach full stop, while people with disabilities are more limited and they can only start the process of getting off the bus when the bus is in full stop and they are afraid that they will not make it out on time. So the image show a person trying to notify the driver that he needs more time, but the driver is busy driving the bus safely. So we also notify the driver that a person with disability needs to get off. So he can basically stop with accessibility in mind, allowing them more time to get off, stop at accessible location, and making sure to open the ramp as needed. So the next image showing an example of a bus that's stopping in a non-accessible location. In many bus stops across the world, there is like a mark on the bus stop where the bus needs to stop to open the ramp, but sometimes other buses are stopping there and the driver not necessarily stop there. But if the driver knows that someone needs to get off and he has some accessibility limitation, so he can make sure to stop in these locations. So thank you again, Access Israel, for having me. My contact information is here and I will be happy to share it. It's basically nirit@lookingbus.com. And we will be happy to continue the conversation and answer questions as needed.
Thank you very much. And again, sign up to the International Global website. More people will be able to contact you directly. Now, last but not least, sorry, I am very happy. A really short presentation, but we felt it has to be included in this webinar in order to provide the full picture. I'm very happy to invite Itzik Lachmani. He's the CEO of AAS, Advanced Accessibility Solution, and he is providing solutions to one very painful issue for people with disabilities, and that is the disabled parking. Using parking signs and customer application. He hopes to make sure that these parking spots will stay only in use for people with disabilities. Take it away, Itzik. Itzik, are you okay?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. Great.
Hi, my name is Yoad. I'm speaking as behalf of Itzik and AAS company. I would like to talk to you about our vision and solution for handicapped parking, which is inseparable from the transportation issue. We all know that the parking spaces are vital and essentials for handicapped people and their everyday actions and access. Today, handicapped parking spots are just parking spots with regular signs and marking. A basic system which doesn't give answers and solutions to some problems such as unauthorized parking and people who misuse their parking permit, such as family members or relatives or friends or someone who got a handicapped parking permit. The sign and parking permits does not give a solution to this. The AAS system is based on an application and a smart handicapped parking sign, which operates on a solar panel. It is connected to the database in the city parking department. The idea is to the system to identify a handicapped person arriving to the space, signal the space is occupied or not occupied. If an unauthorized person arrives to the parking spot, the system alerts with a light and sound signal. So it does a shaming to the person, then gets him to leave the spot. If he doesn't leave the spot after a short time, the department of parking gets a notice and they can send an inspector to take further issues. This optimization of the city handicapped parking spaces usage and accessibility will give handicapped population easy parking, better access, and a better usage of the city parking spaces, which is a win-win for all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And sorry, Yoad, I was given a note saying that you replaced Itzik, so apologies, I didn't see that. And thank you very much for sharing with that, because again, when we're talking accessibility, we're talking about sequence. We're talking about every single part of the journey has to be accessible, and a parking spot is definitely one of the stops that we have to make sure is taken care of. By the way, these technologies that we present, they're part of something that Access Israel is pushing full force the accessible future, really understanding that again, the sequence of accessibility has to also go to technologies, like Yuval mentioned before. Let's stop making accessibility retroactive. Let's make sure our technologies are accessible by design. And this is something that we invite all of you to contact us, hear more about it. We are launching this year the Accessible Future Project, and we'd love every single one of you to be part of it. And again, we're talking network, and I am always more than happy to share and encourage other friends and other partners that are doing amazing jobs. And now in the chat, you will have a link to an amazing initiative by our dear friend Deborah Rue from Rue Global, the Billion Stronger. Guys, we're all part of an amazing, very large community. We're not, we're considered by the UN the largest minority in the world. And the Billion Stronger initiative is taking that and leveraging upon it. So I really urge each and every one of you, contact organizations and people with disabilities in your countries, send them the link. We want the billion to reach a billion. So let's do that. And this is now my time to say thank you very much. I still have one more great thing to end with. But before that, again, I said thank you in the middle and thank you at the beginning. And I must say thank you very much now for all of you that participated. The speakers, which were getting amazing reactions and great speakers from all over the world. The participants who, again, this is the major part of what we're doing here. And I thank you for coming in the evenings, at night, in the morning, depending on the times you're at. And of course, the amazing Access Israel staff. Who basically enables all this to happen. I understand that I am frozen now or black, so I apologize. Zoom, allows me to control just so much of what is happening here, and I don't have any control on that. So my apologies, but thank you very much again for Noah, who led the initiative here in Access Israel with Boaz, with Mia, with Hadar, and of course with Yuval. We really appreciate everything you guys are doing, and thank you for an amazing webinar. I would like to end with Ricardo. I know I'm putting you on the spot for the last minute, but Ricardo Garcia Balamonde from Spain, just give us a tidbit of what's going on with in your neck of the world, and we'll close this event. You're the sweet at the end.
All right. Well, great privilege. Thank you so much. All I can say is that it's been an amazing webinar. I've had to jump off for a few minutes for another meeting, but it's been truly great and so pertinent. I can say that in terms of accessibility of public transportation here in Spain, things have improved a lot in the last 10 years. So I invite you to see what to see what the people from TNB in Barcelona are doing, and EMT, that is the bus company here in Madrid, with all the 100% of the buses are accessible, 100% of the stations. All the technologies that are being implemented in Barcelona, for example, Navilens, that I guess will probably receive some award at Zero Project, and if not, they should, because they created a great technology, Navilens. Okay, so I invite you to look that. And of course, I invite you to visit Spain soon. Please do. Things are kind of in the fifth wave here, but fortunately, we are all getting vaccinated, over 60% of the population now. And things are getting a bit better. Everybody's wearing a mask. Most people, except for young people, being super sensible.
Yeah.
And we're getting a lot of visitors from France, from other countries in Europe, because bars are open and restaurants are open, because people are simply being sensible and businesses are being sensible. So I think
Ricardo, you said the magic word, I think, after 3.5 amazing hours of such great speakers, great presenters, great getting together. Bars in Spain is exactly the place we should all go to now.
I know what you like.
I wish we could go there now, and I'll take a rain check for that. Guys, thank you so much. And the last thing, and that I'm not going to talk after that. So this is going to be like the ending of this amazing day. We spoke about airports. We spoke about taxis. We spoke about buses. We spoke about cars, about golf carts, about really amazing initiatives all over. Cruise lines, of course. We wanted to send you off with one very short video from a great speaker who was supposed to be, but she's off to sea. One of the most incredible views of New York City for me was when I was a guest on The Impossible Dream of Deborah Mullen. Amazing initiative. Catamaran, accessible, fully accessible, sailing all over. And I'm sure the video will say the exact things that need to be said. When we're talking transportation, we want it all. So thank you again, guys. One picture of everybody doing like this with the hands, clapping, and we'll have a screen photograph. You too. Lift up your hands, please. Thank you very much. And great picture. Now, everybody who didn't put himself on video, this is your chance. And we'll move a couple of screens. Guys, it was amazing. Thank you very much. And Noah, hit it with Deborah Mullen. Thank you very much, guys. Are we doing it? Okay,
Thank
we're
you.
getting. Okay, we're having some. Of course, it's the technical problems of the rest. I gave so many compliments, and then the end is. But it's okay. We're going to do it, and we see the cute and amazing Noah and Mia in the screen. Trying to fix things up. So this is the time to say really thank you to all again. Yuval, any last word for the evening?
Can I give a proposition?
Of
Can
course.
I give a proposition?
Of course.
I'm Miguel Haas. I don't know why I'm not in the screen, but there is a problem to travel with airplanes. Airplanes, there are not a place to people that are handicapped, and even not to the bathroom, to the toilets. And we didn't talk about these things that I think that I don't know if someone is doing something about.
So Miguel, I thank you very much for the comment. And this is, you're just opening an opportunity for me to give you a heads up. First of all, our next international face-to-face conference is planned next spring in Israel. This issue will definitely be raised there. There are things that we know of that are being worked on around the world. And of course, this is an issue that needs attention even more. We will be more than happy to send you more information on that. And on that note, guys, thank you very much. And Noah, hit the play button.
The Impossible Dream is a wheelchair-accessible catamaran, one of the only built from the ground up to be wheelchair-accessible. So she's an incredible example of universal design. Everything that was needed to be done so that people with wheelchairs can run this boat made the boat more beautiful, not less. She was built in 2002, commissioned by a sailor named Mike Brown. He had the boat for 10 years. And after 10 years, he looked for a home for it. She was in England. I went to England together with Harry Horgan, the founder of Shake a Leg, and purchased the Impossible Dream and brought her back to the United States. Once back there, we founded a nonprofit called the Impossible Dream, Inc. And what we do is, in the winter, we live here at Shake a Leg, Miami, and we take people out sailing, people with disabilities that don't have other ways to get out on the water. We believe that the water is healing, the water creates community, and improves life for everyone. Boating is very difficult if you are not completely able-bodied. When we go to each port, people see us. They see people with wheelchairs on the boat and running the boat, and it changes their perception about what is possible and that boating should be for everybody. And that's our mission and that's our dream.
This boat is really interesting because we go up and down the coast. We're constantly taking out people for a 2-hour tour, and it's beautiful that they have a good time and they enjoy it, and maybe their eyes are opened up about what's possible in their life, and you know what a really amazing design boat can do. And then we have guest crew and people who are more involved. And they will be on the boat for a month at a time, sometimes longer, and really amazing people because people who have thrived in the face of adversity. It's really great. It's one of my favorite things about this project is meeting so many amazing people who in the face of this incredible life-changing injury still maintain they're happy, they don't complain, and they enjoy life. And it's really, although Deborah hates me to say it, it's really inspiring to be around people like that.
Boat. It doesn't look, there's no medical equipment on it. It doesn't look like it was modified. And it was built for really everybody to be able to enjoy. So we travel up the East Coast in the summers and we take out disability groups, veterans groups, people from rehab hospitals, adaptive sports groups, you name it. We take different groups out on the water for day sails. And then we always have guest crew, people with disabilities, that come and crew with us. So they'll come for multiple days at a time. Deborah's on board for 6 weeks in the summer. We have another friend who has a high-level spinal cord injury. And then sometimes people just do one overnight. Maybe it's their first time on a boat and they're, just being able to participate and sail with us, so huge. So we have like all different kinds of participation that people can do. And once on board, it equalizes the playing field. So once on board, like anybody can help us. And if anybody wants to help me, just let me know. I'll teach you how to throw out the fender. But yeah, anything from helping sailing the boat, staying on watch when we're doing overnights, to cleaning the boat, putting out the fenders and getting ready to dock, throwing lines onto the dock. So we all do that as equally and to everybody's ability as much as possible.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much. Who said impossible? Good night, guys. Good morning to some of you. Good afternoon. Bye-bye. Bye.